All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the first free online private. So I was going to say private pilot. That was our last cast. The Instrument Ground School, just to make sure you're in the right place. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff today. We'll go through kind of how this course works and everything else. We'll go through that in a minute, but we're going to let the rest of the people, since this is the first day of class, get logged in. I see people from all across the U.S., everybody from all the way to Alaska to Florida and up in Maine. I also see whoever is in the Caribbean, very lucky there to be watching. It's a great place to watch this. But keep in mind, this is the free online instrument ground school, not the private pilot ground school. The private pilot ground school will occur in about 30 days from today. It's at the very end of June, just to make sure everybody is in the right place. Before we begin, though, I'll go through just a couple of housekeeping things. You can see kind of off the side screen here, you can see the live chat. That is directly from our website, and we are broadcasting on all three platforms. So there should never really be an excuse of how to find us or log in. Remember that we do broadcast on our website. We also broadcast on YouTube, and we also broadcast on Facebook simultaneously. Okay. So we will go over basically how to watch these and what happens after the fact, and if you were to miss a class, so don't worry about that. On another note, I would like to wish everyone a good Memorial Day. It's always hard to say Happy Memorial Day because it is obviously a day in which we are basically remembering the men and women who served us and valiantly, unfortunately, lost their lives in the process. So, but I do want to basically recognize that fact, and Happy Memorial Day to those that may have loved ones and everyone else out there. So, before we continue with the chat, at the very bottom, we will be going through some FAA test questions throughout this class. Typically, we go through somewhere between 5 to 12 test questions, and we do put them on the screen. If you can do us a great favor, do not put the potential answer in the chat. Does not matter which platform you're on. What you're going to do is scooter over beneath the actual message. You're going to go ahead and click on the vote button, and that will then ask you whatever the question is. Keep in mind, though, that with these questions, sometimes the system, it won't let me put in the full text. Sometimes there's too many characters to get everything in there. So you can always reference the original test question on the screen. I always have the full test question and the full answers on the screen in the PowerPoint then when we go over them. And then just go ahead and plug in whatever answer that you guys have. And then once we're ready to close it out, you guys will see how the rest of the class did. We'll review the answer and go over the explanations in real time. The reason why we ask you to do that is we don't want to give away the potential answers to your fellow students. Let them come up with their own answers. This usually takes a couple of times before everyone understands this concept. But keep in mind that is only available on our platform. If you are on YouTube or Facebook, just write it down on a piece of paper. That would be fantastic. Before we begin, though, I just want to remind you guys, this is the free instrument ground school. This is not the free private pilot ground school. If we have anybody here that is just starting out or basically looking for the private pilot class that starts next month, it'll be towards the very end of June, about 4 weeks from now. And you're more than welcome to stick around and watch and kind of see how this progresses. And for some of our students that were in our last free private pilot ground school, I see a couple of you, Gene and Van, out there. The way that this course is going to work is a lot of this is refresher. So the first 3 days, we're going to be talking about obviously the requirements for the instrument rating. We'll be going over your flight instruments and some airport things that are pretty much in line with private pilot stuff. Then we're going to go over regulations as well on Friday. So at that point, that's kind of where the private pilot basic foundation side is going to bleed away to the instrument side, where it is obviously a lot more technical. So just want to keep that in mind, but you're more than welcome to hang out and stay with us. Other things that I also want to mention as well, since we do have the capability of live chat on all of our platforms, just try to keep it in line with whatever the discussion is, aviation related. Preferably no off-color commentary or anything along those lines. There are moderators on all three platforms, and a lot of our moderators have been doing this for multiple classes. This is our 22nd class that I've taught with everybody here. And they know what's up, and they're there to answer any questions that you may or may not have. So if you have a technical question, pilot question, most of our moderators are either ground instructors, some are CFIs, and the other handful that I see online are actually from our CFI class as well. So we'll see all of you guys tomorrow for continuation of that. They do have the right to kick you out, so just keep that in mind. We're trying to foster a learning environment, and these are long classes. I completely understand. We'll go through the mechanics of how everything is going to work. In addition to that, the classes will traditionally run for about 3 hours. I understand we've got some East Coasters out there. I feel for you. On the West Coast here, it's just past 5 p.m. For those on the East Coast, if you need to drop off at any point in time, feel free to drop off. This is fully recorded. We post the recordings about 1 hour or so after our live classes, and you can basically watch whatever you missed in the process. If you can't attend a class, because we teach Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over the next 4 weeks, it is also recorded for you guys as well, and you have the capability of watching those replays on our website, on YouTube, or on Facebook. Plenty of different options depending on what your preferences are, okay? Basically throughout the 3-hour period, we don't just teach for 3 hours. Every hour we take a break. The first hour we take a 10-minute break. The second hour we take a 5-minute break. And then at the very, very end of class, we open it up to a Q&A. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. If I see at any point there's a lot of questions in the chat and people are stumbling for whatever reason, we'll pause or maybe review something. And then also keep in mind those moderators do an excellent job answering all your questions in real time as well. But that's the whole purpose of a live class, is we want to basically go with the pace of the class. Sometimes we get out a little bit early just because we cover the material. Sometimes if we don't cover everything that's on the agenda for today, it's just going to bleed over into the next class period. Okay. So that is the basics in a nutshell. Let's go ahead and see what we're actually supposed to be covering for the purposes of today. So this is class number 1, and I will talk a little bit about who we are. I'll talk about myself. We'll do a course introduction. I'll show you how to navigate around the website, where to find your quizzes, your tests, your handouts, how to get to the videos. Then we're going to kind of switch gears. I'm going to find out a little bit about you guys. We'll watch a cool video I'll share with you. It's about 5 minutes, and kind of want to know your background, where you're coming from, where you are in the process. Then we'll talk about what is required to get or obtain your instrument rating. What can you do once you have it? And then what are some basic limitations that will apply as well? We'll go over the medical requirements, pretty easy. Basically a 3rd class medical or basic med, either one. Then we'll talk about instrument currency. What do you need to do to maintain your currency? So just like when as you're a private pilot, you have some currency requirements as your flight review, and then also your takeoff and landings to carry passengers for day and night. You're gonna have some additional requirements that you have to abide by. We'll talk about how to safety pilot, or how to actually log the time as well. We'll also kind of go over the overview in terms of if you want to use a simulator to count towards some of your hours, what is the process for that? It is kind of specific. And then we'll wrap up the class. We're going to talk about the National Airspace System. So we'll talk about basically all the different facilities and controllers that help us out throughout the process. Everybody from flight service to our en route controllers to our ARTCCs, which are our centers. And then we'll wrap up everything with instrument scanning techniques. There's 2 techniques the FAA wants you to know about. We'll talk about pros and cons with each. And then the reality is that you guys will develop your own scans over time. And that is going to be on the first agenda. Okay, so these classes are the full classes. You're not missing anything. To date, we've actually let's see, I think we've had 60,000 students run through our courses in the last year alone. So you guys are kind of just adding to that number. Okay, so a little bit about us and a little bit about me. Probably should have started off with that first. So once again, my name is David Tushin. I'm going to be your instructor, and I've basically been doing these classes for the last year and a half live as we do it here. We do have a great support team, and then we also have our volunteer moderators that are also helping us out. This was our old cubby hole, and we were located in California here. So we're in Camarillo, California, which is about an hour north of the Los Angeles area, maybe 2 hours with traffic depending on the day. But this was our old broadcast location. Now it's actually built out quite a bit more. I'll have to update that photo, but that's usually where my home is compared to where we are located. My background is I actually started flying early on, probably in late 1990s. I had a family friend. He took us up to Big Bear in that Piper Arrow on the left. So had a little bit of experience at that point, and then I finally went for my first flight lesson back in 2001. So right before 9/11, I started flying, had a great intention of trying to finish it up. Unfortunately, with 9/11 and everything that basically transpired after the fact, I put everything on hold, decided to just go back to college and kind of get that stuff taken care of. And but it's never really left my blood. So I worked a bunch of corporate jobs and other things throughout basically the 20s. And then finally back in 2015 or so, the market was starting to come back for pilots and hiring and everything else. Decided to basically get the rest of my licenses. So private all the way through CFI and II. I think I got my CFII in exactly 6 months from the day I restarted. Actually 5 months and 29 days. And then exactly 1 day later, 6-month mark, I got my CFI add-on after the fact. Basically instructed from that period with the same flight school that I did, which was a Part 61. So if anybody says you have to go through, if you want to do it accelerated, you can absolutely do anything you want accelerated through a Part 61, but you're ultimately the driver. You've got to make it, you got to make the commitment and also push yourself and also make sure you have a CFI that's willing to do it with you as well. Okay. After that, basically instructed for about 9 months, went from 300 hours to 1,500 hours. And then I was hired on with Compass Airlines out of LAX. Flew for them until they unfortunately ceased operations back in March of last year due to the pandemic. So I was assigned on the Embraer Air 175, flew with great crews, met a lot of good people over there. It was very sad to kind of see everything come to a close, but had the opportunity to fly pretty much, I think the furthest we flew was Nashville to our maintenance base, but flew in Mexico, Canada, and everywhere in between, both on the American and also the Delta side. So it was a lot of fun going through that process. Basically, ever since I became a flight instructor, I have continued basically training students, even kind of on the weekends when I was outside of the realm of the airlines, and then basically went back into it full time, where we're now hitting that 60,000 student threshold. So it's very exciting for us to be able to offer these free classes. And that's a little bit about me. We'll find out a little bit more about you guys. But if you have any questions, whether it's airline related or anything else, feel free to post a message and we'll do our best to basically answer that. So pre-pandemic, we had a little bit smaller offices back then. This was actually one of our CFI classes. You can tell how enthusiastic these folks are here on the left-hand side. Maybe they're a little stressed. So we used to teach these actually in smaller groups. Usually our largest class was about 20 to 30 people. And we used to teach basically private all the way through CFI, CFII in person. After the pandemic happened, we ended up switching gears and doing this online digitally, and we had great success with it. And through your support as well, we're basically able to grow. And like I said, we're able to service a lot more students than we currently have the capabilities, or basically the capabilities back then to do. But I kind of got my start, especially paying for my flight training. The first thing I did after I got my private pilot license was become a ground instructor. And I actually started teaching students private and instrument, even while I was working on my instrument. So I'm very, very familiar with the content, the course, and everything else. And we try to match it and align it with the ACS material. Throughout this course, you guys will learn the fundamentals. Plus, we're also going to introduce scenario-based training. So we want to make sure that you can basically apply these fundamentals as we go through the process here. Okay. A couple updates for you with the upcoming classes. Obviously, this class is going to run from today until June 25th. So just as a reminder, it's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. So understand some people will drop off later at night. Not a problem. You guys can watch the replays. If we have anybody here that is just starting out, the private pilot ground school is going to start on June 28th, and that will run through July 23rd. It's the same schedule, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 4 weeks, 5 to 8:30 p.m. And if anybody's headed out to Oshkosh, that will be the following week after the conclusion of this class. Now, the way that this class is designed is there's a total of 12 lessons. Each lesson is approximately about 3 to 3.5 hours with the Q&A. You don't have to stick around for the Q&A. If you have questions, that's the reason why we're here. We want to make sure everybody understands the material. At the end of the day, my goal is to not just teach you how to answer the questions on the test, but I want to make sure you can apply the material that you learn in this class in the real world. And then also I'm looking for safer and proficient pilots. Basically, we're looking for proficiency and consistency at the end of the day for people who walk out of our courses. Okay. As a reminder, the live classes are at 5 p.m. 3 times a week. And then this course is designed to get you past the FAA written, but it's also good for oral and practical testing purposes as well. The scenarios are also there to kind of drive how you would approach the situation. And we do go through them in real time on the screen. Okay, we'll talk about the course materials and everything moving forward. And then we always have at the very end of class the opportunity to chat with us, or me, that is, and I'll open it up to any questions, even if it is outside of this course. The way that this course is set up, and like I said, we'll go through the mechanics of how to log in and everything else, is that typically our course materials are available to you about 3 hours prior to the start of the class day. That might be a little bit earlier nowadays, but we do send out a reminder email, so you guys will get 12 emails from us, 11 remaining. So basically, if you don't want those emails, you can unsubscribe, but those are just reminder emails that basically the course will start about 3 hours from now. And then that's when you can actually start accessing the materials. So those materials include, additional supplemental text, PDF handouts, or anything else. Anything that I talk about in class during the specific lesson will be included within that lesson. Okay. Once the classes are finished, I usually say about an hour to 2 hours after the fact that the live stream ends, then we're actually able to download the information, get it back up on our server, and right where you guys are watching this, if you're watching this on our website, where you guys are currently located, the live video will be replaced with the recording. So you will have the opportunity to watch it from there, okay? Keep in mind, this is not a watered down course. So these are some images that folks share with us on social media. If you always want to share with us, feel free to do so. We always appreciate it. Like to know how you guys are doing as well. Make sure that some of you guys are coming from work. Make sure you grab a bite or something, coffee, whatever it may be. In the last class, I think we said rebourbonate for some of you, or recaffeinate for the others. This is the same class that you guys, and same content that you guys would get, assuming you were sitting right in front of me in our instrument class as well. Okay, so it's not watered down. You are expected, in order to kind of keep up, you do have to either watch the lessons, and then also you might have to, take the quizzes and basically participate in order to, move forward and actually be successful with this class. Okay. 93% of our 60,000 students finish the course. So 93% of 60,000 people have finished this course, all of our courses. 99% of those people will pass the FAA exam on the first attempt. Okay. Just to kind of put it into perspective, but there is a little bit of work and commitment on your side. So do what you need to do to basically prepare. Most of the materials that we're going to be talking about are basically going to be available for free through the FAA, although there is a recommended textbook. I like this image. This is one that someone threw on our Facebook group out there. Someone said this is what it's like on the 3rd hour. You guys tell me if that is true or not. It is going to be a lot of information. Some of it is going to be repeated. And the main thing that I'll kind of point out is for anybody that is expecting purely instrument, we do have to unfortunately go over some private pilot basic stuff that you probably already learned, but we're going to kind of have to relearn it because it is foundational to your course as an instrument pilot. So what I mean by that is you still have some FARs that are still going to apply, in addition to the new ones that we have to teach you through the IFR as well in Part 91. Okay. All right. So someone says, so true. Yep, that's life. All right, so with the website, we are always constantly updating our curriculum and everything else. And I just want to make sure everybody understands how to kind of navigate and move around the website. I originally had these as slides, but I'll just show you real quick what this is supposed to look like when you guys log in. So at this point, when you are officially logged in, it's going to drop you on the news feed. Kind of looks like a Facebook and everything else. Obviously, there's some people that are still stuck out there. Travis will help them. And you guys will have everything except for the black bar running across the top. Okay, so all you're going to do, very simply, you can click on online courses. That's kind of your home button, if you want to call it that. And that's going to take you to this screen. You're probably not going to have as many courses with what I see here as an admin, but all of our courses are basically listed here. The ones that you guys want to pay attention to are the ones at the top that say free online courses. Okay, make sure that you're grabbing the instrument. I'm pretty sure the private pilot's not going to open for you, but go ahead and click on the instrument. So then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the course and the quizzes and everything else associated with it. All you want to do is make sure you click that big blue button that says continue, and that will drop you off wherever you left off in the course. I recommend taking a look at the Welcome Start Here page and the frequently asked questions. This will usually, help you, guide you with, the requirements of your instrument rating, some text and so forth, some materials that you're going to need for the course. Obviously, we can see the live class as I'm doing it right now, which is kind of trippy. You do also have the chat functionality. If I'm on a larger screen, this would be side by side here. And then all you're going to do is just find the correct class. So for example, today is class number 1. You guys have class number 1 up right here. So you can just click on that, and then hopefully that's where pretty much everybody is navigated to at this point. Okay. At the very bottom here, you will find either additional videos and those types of things if it's associated with the course, or if I found that it might provide some insight or be beneficial to you. I don't try to provide you guys with a lot of fluff. Everything that we're going to talk about, you will always have it divided into these sections. You'll have course documents and downloads, and then you're going to have website links as well. Beneath that, if you are following along in either the Jepson or the Rod Machado book, I do put in the chapters for the following class. So this Wednesday, we're going to be talking about aircraft flight systems, and also basically primarily just going to be a review of your flight instruments, how they work, and everything else. Okay. At the very, very end, you guys will see a quiz. You can always scroll down to the very bottom of every page, and there is a quiz, or underneath class 1 on the left-hand side, there is the free instrument quiz. That's the same thing. It'll take you to the same place. Go ahead and click on that. That will open up the quiz that you want to take. And very simply, it looks and kind of acts just like an FAA exam. Okay. So it does give you the potential questions. It gives you your multiple choice. Everything that you need is built in and designed in this course. So that way it's kind of a one-stop shop for everything that you need to do. If you want to mark a question and review, you can clearly hit that button and then continue before you hit submit. And you have the ability to basically talk about, you have the ability to review your test questions at the very end. I'll show you how to do that. And it will give you the corrected answers and also the explanations behind it. Okay, so you'll have the ability to take these as many times as you want prior to taking the final exam on the last day. Okay, so once again, your home screen is online courses. From there, you click on the Instrument Pilot Ground School Free Access, hit the continue button, and then hopefully we're all on the same page. Okay. You also have access to different menus once you actually log in. So like I said, once you're on that page, you'll notice that we have this flyout menu on the left-hand side. If you want to update anything in here, you do have your profile information. So if you want to add a picture or anything else, you can do so. You can put in your home airport. The course information, this is another way to get to it on the left-hand side. There's My Courses. Once you guys are finished with the class and you get your certificate and your endorsement, we email it to you, but also it is stored in the system under your profile as well, under the certificates. There's a group section where you can find additional content and documents. I'll show you that here in a minute. If you want to send us a message at any point in time, you can do so, and I'll talk about that as well. So with the messages, you are more than welcome. My instructor profile is pretty much on every page of the lessons. In the event that you want to send me a message, feel free to do so. Just keep in mind that if it's something technical related, meaning a problem with a website, a billing issue or something else like that, you're going to need to send that to the help desk because it complicates matters. If you want to just kind of ask a question, an airline question, a pilot question, give me an update on how you guys are doing, then please send me a message directly through the system. If it's something other than that, like a technical issue or something else, then I'll show you how to basically open up a help desk ticket as well. All right, so once you guys are logged in, here's kind of the layout. As I showed you guys before, I'll point out a few other things that we can do. So once you click on that Instrument Pilot Ground School and then hit the continue, this is the menu that we're talking about. So you obviously have your classes, and then right beneath the class, there is a quiz that's associated with whatever topic that we covered during that class. In addition to that, in the event you guys need to, you can always click on your name, and there will be a drop-down menu that will give you further functionality, and basically it's the same menu as on what you're going to find on the left-hand side. Once the course goes live, which is about 20 minutes prior to 5 p.m., you guys probably saw the countdown timer and some music playing. This little airplane will start to go away in the center screen here, and you also have the chat functionality as well. If you want to go full screen, you do have the ability to do so. Just click that big blue button and it will take you to a full screen. Keep in mind that it does block the chat if you basically go that route. On all of the lesson pages, you have the ability to take your notes. It works just like a word processor. It saves it to your profile. We do not have access to it, so it is secure and it is just for your eyes only. So whatever you guys want to do there. And you do have the ability to download it in a Word document or actually take it offline as a PDF as well after the fact. All you got to do is click it. You can move it around the screen and it will basically save your notes from section to section. The other thing I'll also point out is here is how you get to the help desk. There's a yellow headset. If you hover your mouse over it, it kind of acts like a tongue. It sticks in and out. If you need to, if you're having a problem accessing the course, if you're having a problem logging in, if you're having a problem pretty much with anything above and beyond just a simple, content related question, go ahead and open up a help desk ticket. That is the button you want to use, and that's available whether you're logged in or logged out. Continuing down the document here, as you guys can see on this side, we have a couple different things going on. So you have basically your master menu. This was pulled from our UAV class, but they're all designed the same. We always go through the course introduction, whatever we're going to be trying to cover for that day. Here's all of our documents. So any type of document that I discuss inside of this class will be located under that lesson. Okay, so if I refer to something, just remember you can scroll down and actually download it ahead of time. There is the course website link. So once again, if I do refer to anything outside that is not really a downloadable, situation, you can basically follow that website link. And I do also include the FAA pilot testing supplement. It will obviously be for IFR on our course under every single course website link. And it's also included in all of the quizzes as well. We do put the pictures in, but sometimes, as you guys know, some people want the physical copy or be able to Zoom unlimited. So you can always download that PDF. Also, we will be going through some FAA test questions. And if you're unable, or maybe you need your readers at some point, you might want to have that handy on your desktop. If you go to that test, the take notes section, this is exactly what it looks like in number 4. You can basically use it as a word processor. It will save it by section. And then, like I said, you can either download it via Word doc or actually print it out from your system. And all of your notes are going to be housed within your profile area. Okay. All right. Once you're ready to take the exam, couple ways to take the exam. Number 1, it's always going to be beneath whatever the lesson we're teaching, or if you keep scrolling down like I showed you guys before, you can actually get to the quiz. So in this example, here is the quiz that we just looked at. So just going over a few changes here. You will have your test question. You'll have the 3 potential answers. We've uploaded about 900 test questions for the IFR exam throughout the course, and they are segregated based upon subject until you get to your final exam. We try not to overload you with all of the potential questions. So in the event you want to take the exam or the quizzes multiple times, feel free to do so. The server will record it each time. It is not a requirement to take these, but it's highly recommended. It'll help you kind of solidify the information and then also kind of see the way that the FAA is presenting these test questions. Keep in mind, this is probably the most technical test that the FAA does, and it also has the lowest pass rate just because of the difficulty of the test questions that they provide. Once you are all the way done, this next button will actually turn into a submit button. You do have to actually finish or basically put in some type of answer into all of these locations before you can actually submit the test for it to be graded. Once it's graded, it is automatic, and then it will show up as basically a review. It'll give you what went well, what didn't, what are the explanations for the ones that you missed, and so forth. If you want to basically mark a question, that is basically your review or mark. So if you want to basically mark question number 3, you're not sure about it, it will turn it yellow, so that way you can go back to it. And we're in the process of changing these colors a little bit as well. In the event you are coming to a test question and there is an image within the test question, it is not that small. You can actually click on the image. It will enlarge it. In the upper right-hand corner, you do have the ability to zoom in as much as you want. On a mobile device, this is a little bit more challenging. It is possible. Just keep in mind there are some limitations, obviously, on smaller screens that have less real estate. But you do have the ability to basically zoom in. Plus, the test question will reference whatever the figure is. That's the reason why we give you the links to the FAA testing supplement. So if you want to open up the PDF copy on your desktop or your computer, you can always look at whatever figure number is associated with the exam and then zoom in that way as well. But all of the images are preloaded for you guys. Once you guys take your final exam, very simply, this is how you're going to check your scores. The fastest way to do it once you're logged in is basically go to your name. There's a little tiny chevron arrow, and if you click on that, it's going to expand this menu basically down. What you're going to do is then highlight over courses, and then that's going to basically open up a secondary menu, and you're going to then click on something called Course Progress. Depending on how many courses you have with us, you're going to find the appropriate course for you guys. That this would actually, instead of saying free private pilot ground school, this would say a free instrument pilot ground school. I think it's called GS4. And you would then, don't click on the words. If you click on the words, unfortunately, it's just going to take you back to the course. The little chevron or arrow here, you want to click on that. And what will end up happening is it will expand and provide the information on all the quizzes that you've taken over time. Okay, so this is one where I just clicked randomly throughout our private pilot one. So if I want to basically figure out why I did a 33%, I can click on the stats button, which would then open up the original test. It'll tell me what time I took the test, how long I took the test, how did I answer compared to the correct answer, and then more importantly, it gives you all the explanations as well. So if you want to review that information, it's there for you. Or in the event you take a quiz and you're thinking, I'm not sure if the server saved it, 99.9% of the time in our experience, it does save it. You can go through this process and actually verify every time you take the quiz or the exam. So you can take these as many times as you guys want to your heart's content. Okay. With the FAA testing supplement, obviously, we're not using the private pilot one. This is going to be the instrument rating one. So these are the images that are provided to you in each of the exams. In addition to that, remember, like I said, I'm gonna harp on this a little bit. Download the testing supplement. We put it there for a reason. There are some cheats in there that can actually help you answer other test questions. And at the very beginning, the first 30 pages of the testing supplement are actually, there's a legend that can also assist you as well in the event you may have forgotten something on an approach plate or something else. Very simply, just like in your private pilot days, you're going to reference the figure that is provided in the test question, and then you can basically zoom in. And then obviously for the official FAA exam, you will get a copy of this on your testing day. Okay. All right, the last couple things here are going to be groups and documents. So under groups and documents, if you guys go to the groups section on the left-hand side, you can find the main group, which is the Check Ride Prep group. If you click on that, that is where we house all of the documents. I'll make sure Travis has everybody has access to this. If you don't have access to this right now, I'll make sure you guys have access to this by Wednesday here. So if you click on documents, this is where all of the supplemental documents, the ACs, anything that you want to know. I think there's something like 3,000 documents in these folders. So whether you're an international student, majority is going to be FAA, but there is some CASA, EASA stuff in there and some older ICAO stuff as well. But if you are looking for any type of supplements, this is where you can actually find it. And if you want to upload your own, feel free to do so as well. All right, so if you guys need help at any point in time, we're here for you. We try to have a response rate of about 24 hours, but keep in mind the first week of class, it usually takes us a little longer. Even though we currently have a couple hundred people on live right now, most of our classes are typically somewhere between 400 to 600 people actively taking the course, and they may not be able to watch the live class. So there are a lot of questions in the beginning, how do we log in and everything else. Remember that you have that little yellow headset in the bottom corner of all of your pages. You can always click on that. When you click on that, you can then submit a ticket, put in your information, your email address, what is going wrong, what can we help you with? And like I said, our normal resolution time is somewhere between 12 to 24 hours. Usually the first week takes a little bit longer as well. Okay. If you guys send me a message directly or an email, it does actually increase the time to go through it because we have to then search for your account and everything else. So the quicker that people adopt this, everybody in the last private pilot class did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. It will speed up our time in terms of resolving whatever the issue may be actually going on. In the event that the stream lags, welcome to technology. We've probably learned at this point how to use Zoom meetings and everything else, but it is inevitable that something will go wrong because this is technology and this is a live streaming class, okay? Most of the time, the stream is going to be a problem sometimes on the user side. So in the event that it lags for whatever reason, you can click the F5 button, the F5 key at the very top. That's going to refresh your internet page depending on what you're watching. You know, we stream, our service is fiber, so we have a gig up and a gig down. It's usually not really on our end. Occasionally it happens. But just keep that in mind, that if you got a lot of people watching Netflix and they're all home, and it's typically happens on Fridays, you might have some intermittent connection issues, but they typically will go away after about 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes it's just kind of spotty. Okay. All right. Couple study tips for you guys in terms of taking the exam and everything else. This exam is designed for the instrument rating airplane exam. The final exam will consist of 60 questions. You need to be 15 years of age to take it. It will be 2.5 hours allowed. And once again, you need a 70% to pass the official FAA exam. As you guys and gals know, the higher the score, the easier the check ride for the most part. So try to get preferably in high 80s or preferably 90s if you can. And then the way that those test questions are basically broken out, on the bottom left here, we have basically our percentages. So almost everything is tested. Some areas a little bit more. So the biggest ones are obviously weather reports, forecast, wind shear, those types of things. That's 10 to 20%. But as you can see, air traffic rules, IFR navigation, that could be between 5 and 20, depending on how the dice roll there. And then we always have safety. Basically, the safety conversation with ADM and CRM is pretty much the same for every license that you have. At the end of the day, I just want to give you this reminder. We do not teach to the written test. I will not stand up here, unfortunately, and tell you guys this is absolutely A and this is absolutely B. I want you guys to understand the concepts behind it. It's going to teach more than probably what you're required to know, but it will make you a safer pilot at the end of the day. Take advantage of all the quizzes and tests that we make available to you. Our team has spent a lot of time and hours uploading all this data, getting you all of the updated test questions and providing supplemental information. And it's there basically to get you guys to succeed with the course. That's our goal at the end of the day. There's about 800 to 900 test questions within this database that we've uploaded. And we're continuously going through them, looking for changes and updates in the regulations and everything else. So like I said, 99% of people who take the exam, who've used our course, have passed on the first try. So that's kind of a testament to that. I would recommend continuing taking the practice test and also identify any questions that you may have repeatedly missed, or maybe it's something you don't understand. Maybe the explanation doesn't make sense to you. You can always email us and we'll try to walk through the question with you, see if we can get you to understand it a little bit better. Use this as a resource. That's why we're here. That's the reason why we're doing this. We're here to help you succeed. In addition to that, you also have access to the Facebook group. So if you're unfamiliar with that, currently we've got about 8,100 people, almost 8,200 people here very shortly. That are basically helping out everybody. Okay, so we have everybody from student pilots to instructors. Our staff is in here. Our moderators are in here. If you have a question, typically this would be your fastest way to get some type of answer. Okay, so if you're not sure what type of E6B to buy, or you're doing a flight and you're not sure what to expect, or you're working on a check ride, this would be the place. And I guarantee you someone will answer you probably within about 5 minutes. Okay, and more people will pile on after the fact. It's a good resource. And I'm in here as well. So, reach out, and this is something, if you just have a test question, post it. We'll see what we can do to help out as well. The FAA testing supplement is your friend. As I said before, the first 30 or 40 pages of the IFR instrument testing supplement does have a bunch of legends in it. I'll show you guys how to use those. So occasionally it might ask you a question and you may forget what a symbol means on an approach plate. So you can always reference that and actually get a corrected answer for you. And then finally, this is foundational material. You don't need to know everything that comes out of my mouth. We do talk a lot about, various different things along the way. You can see exactly after the class how they relate to the test questions or the quiz questions after each lesson. And you can kind of see what is going to be the most important thing to succeed with the written. But I will provide you more information. And this is, as you guys know, with aviation, we have to continually be in this kind of learning process to, always be learning in order to basically maintain our proficiency and also safety. This course is designed around the ACS standards, so everything that the ACS basically requires of us to teach you will be covered within this course. It's not going to be a slim down version or anything along those lines. For those that may have been outside of the loop for a little bit, the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, replaced the older version of the practical test standards, the PTS. And this is going to be more of a scenario-driven exam. So not necessarily your written. Your written is going to be pretty much, Q&A or basically just the standard written questions. But your oral will be heavily driven by scenarios that will basically be determined by whatever DPE or FAA examiner you use. But the ACS provides all the information in terms of what you need to know, consider, and do. And this includes both you, the instructor, and the evaluators. Technically, anything outside of the ACS is not really fair game for the DPE to ask you. Most are going to stick to the script. And the big thing that you're going to notice between the PTS and the ACS is the ACS, we have 3 different areas now. So we basically have a knowledge component, a risk management component, and a skills component. For the purposes of your check ride, you'll have to do 1 knowledge, 1 risk, and all of the skills. But the evaluator, if they want to do more, it is in their basically purview if they to basically ask you more questions within this section, especially if they think there's a deficiency on your part for whatever reason. On your FAA exam, when you get it back, if you don't get 100%, it will give you testing codes on there. The old testing codes used to be called PLT codes. I don't know what the new ones are called nowadays, but those testing codes are now going to reference the ACS. So for example, if you got India Romeo Victor Alpha Kilo 1, that would basically tell us that you missed something dealing with ground-based navigation, dealing with procedures for intercepting and tracking courses and arcs. Okay, so that's how it will correlate with the ACS in terms of the material. Okay. All right. Going on to what everybody wants to know, how you're supposed to get your FAA written test endorsement from us, since you do need it to sit for the official FAA exam. Very simply, this is what our requirements are. All you need to do is watch all 12 of our lessons. It does not matter whether you're watching live at this moment, or maybe you need to watch the recorded ones. Does not matter if you're watching on our website, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, or a combination. Does not matter. Okay, the server grabs the IP addresses and it does some magic technical stuff behind the scenes, and it basically ties it to your profile somehow. No clue. So you just need to watch 12 lessons. Okay, then you need to pass the final exam with an 80% or higher. Okay, the very, very last day of class, I believe that's going to be June 25th, if memory serves me correctly, that will be our very last day of class, and that's also when the final exam will become available and live to everybody. The final exam will mimic the FAA exam. You get 2.5 hours to complete it, and it's 60 randomized FAA test questions from the quizzes that you guys took before. You guys have unlimited attempts to take the quiz or the final exam, okay? So if you're not getting the score that you want, keep taking it. It's there for you guys to basically use and to get better. And even if you are getting in the 80s, I would highly encourage people to continue taking it because that'll expose you to more test questions, and it's also better prior to actually getting or going into the official exam as well. Okay. Once you meet that criteria, you watch the 12 lessons and you pass the final exam with an 80% or higher, automatically the server is going to issue you a certificate of completion, and it will also issue you the endorsement that you need, that you can stick in your logbook or just print it out and take it to the testing center in order to take the official FAA exam. The endorsement that I give you does not expire, so you can hold on to it, but I always encourage people try to take it sooner rather than later. Just because the information is very much use it or lose it, and it's going to start to degrade in your memory over time. Okay. The other thing I also wanted to mention is that, remember, once you actually take the FAA exam, your results are only valid for 24 calendar months. So keep that in mind as well. If you exceed 24 calendar months, you will have to take the written again as well. Anybody here that is a continuing pilot, pretty much everybody should be. You have the ability to also get FAA Wings credits. At the very end of class, there's a form that you fill out. You basically submit the information through the FAA Wings website, and then we go through and approve it after the fact at the end of the conclusion of the class. Okay. So the other question that I usually get as well is, some people, and I wanted to address this before we move on, some people will always ask, I watched the lesson and I took the quiz, but I don't see a green check mark. Okay. The green check marks will only show up if you take the quiz, the lesson quiz, with an 8, and you basically score an 80% or higher. Okay. The check marks in each of the lessons have no bearing on you actually completing and getting your endorsement. Okay, no bearing whatsoever. We're always going to get questions about it. The green check marks mean nothing. Okay, I know a lot of us, I'm kind of anal retentive. I want to see them. If you want to see it, basically take the quiz in each lesson, pass the quiz in it with an 80% or higher, you'll get a green check mark. All right. All right, so continuing, what we're gonna do is, like I said, we will take a break at the top of the hour. It'll be a 10-minute break, and then we'll basically continue on with the material. We'll go on for another hour and then take a 5-minute break. All right, so here's the big question everybody always wants to know, and it's always fun kind of disproving people as well. We usually always get people on Facebook and stuff saying, you know, it's a scam or something like that, or what's the catch? So I'm here to tell you that, you know, this course, you can make it through this course from A to Z in the allotted time, because we've had, like I said, 60,000 people have sat in your seat. Some of you have probably sat through multiple classes that I've taught at this point. So it is doable. Okay. It is going to be a little bit of work, but there is no catch. You guys have access to the entire course. You have access to the quizzes. You guys have access to the supplemental materials. And also everything that you need to basically get your endorsement at the end of the day. We don't charge for the endorsement. We don't do anything like that. Okay. So the only thing that we do is we will turn off the free access. Okay. So the last day of class is going to be June 25th. Okay. So June 25th is our last day of class, our live class. We give you guys 5 days until Wednesday, June 30th at 12 noon Pacific time. That's our time over here, to basically wrap up anything that you need to conclude. So if you maybe need to watch a lesson, take a quiz, take the final multiple times, you guys have 5 days to basically play catch up at any point in time. Okay. It's more than enough time for everybody to do it. Out of the 60,000 people, 93 out of, I'll just say it this way, 93 out of 100 people will pass or get through the course. Okay. They'll earn their endorsement. Out of those people, 99% will go on and take the final, the actual FAA test, and they'll pass it the first time. So there's just a handful of people that unfortunately did not get it the first time. And we'll just leave it at that. Okay. So that's the only thing that we do. We're going to hold your feet to the fire. We want to make sure that people, when you started, we kind of get everybody through the course at the very end. And that's kind of the goal. And that's the reason why a lot of people benefit from the live instruction rather than buying a program. Sometimes what ends up happening is we know that it's there, kind of like all the books on my bookshelf behind me. And I've got a lot of them that I know I want to read and I know I should read, but I just don't have time to do it. Okay. So that is really the only catch that I can tell you, okay, is that we will close out the course. But you guys basically have 35 days to get everything done, and we've never really had any issues with that. Now, we do also have lifetime access, and this is my little public service announcement. I always try to keep these brief just because we have a lot of information to cover, okay? So some of you, I know we've got some lifetime members in the class already. So some people actually purchased in our private pilot class. We do actually offer lifetime membership, which does not only include this class, but basically all of our classes. And that does include all the updates and everything that's basically associated with it. And usually what I like to tell people is it's the few who actually pay for the many. It's the few that actually sign up for the lifetime that allows us to continue offering free classes. Last month, I thought that was going to be our last free private pilot class, but we had enough people purchase the lifetime membership that we could actually offer an additional one this summer. Keep in mind that I would love to do these forever for free. But the reality is that the server cost, the bandwidth is insane. And the main thing that I can tell you is just in our private pilot class alone last month, we had just shy of 20 million minutes watched. You can imagine how much video bandwidth that takes up that we have to pay for. Okay. But with that, we do have our Memorial Day special, or week special that's going on. That will go until the end of the week, which is basically 40% off, or you can even break it into 3 payments. It does include the private pilot ground school as well. So if you're working on a flight review or you need to refresh, you can always go through and back to that course and the associated oral prep course that goes along with it. You'll have access to this class, the Instrument Pilot Ground School, indefinitely. So we do know that life comes up, things, family, work, whatever it is. If you do need longer than the 35-day period, this would basically give you access to have it for life, including the updates. This is basically a full one. So this gives you the commercial pilot ground school, also the drone pilot ground school that we have, the 4-flight course, which we're going to actually be reteaching at the end of summer here. So stay tuned for that. And also the weekly seminars and Q&A. So we do typically do something weekly that is live. During those weeks, you're more than welcome to join us. And then you also get the 24/7 instructor support, not only from myself, but from our team as well. So with this, because we have basically 2 different versions, we have our live programming. So think of it this way. If you're a lifetime member, you get basically an all access pass to any of our live classes. If you guys like this format, you can join us at any point in time. You don't have to worry about time commitments or anything else. On the flip side of that, if you want to venture off into your own and need something a bit more structured, all of the courses on the left-hand side of the screen there, we basically break those out. So instead of watching 12 4-hour lessons, it's more like 50 to 60 lessons. Each of the lessons will basically be broken into somewhere between 3 to 10-minute increments. They're much more focused. We can get through a lot of the information quicker. Obviously, we don't have breaks in some of the things that we deal with on the live side as well, okay? Those are professionally recorded in the studio here. And then, it's more focused, like I said, and we can get through, actually, we add more content because we actually have more time to do so. With each one of the courses, you do have access to the unlimited practice quizzes and exams. Currently, there's 7,500 test questions. We also just added the AGI, which is the Advanced Ground Instructor, and the IGI, the Instrument Ground Instructor. Those are coming online very shortly. And then you also have the ability to get your FAA written test endorsement for any of the licenses or rating that requires it, and also FAA wings credits as well. You'll have access to all of our past webinars, I think 30 and counting at this point. And then the flight maneuver lessons for private pilot are actually coming on this week here. So you'll have access to that as well. And then we're also working on those for the instrument and the commercial. That's kind of the next step, thanks to moderator Ryan out there. What we've decided to do as well is we did this with the last class. People said they wanted to see this again, so we're going to do it. Basically, the first 100 people that sign up, so the first 100 people have signed up, will extend a 1 hour. It's a free 1 hour one-on-one ground lesson. For all of you guys and gals that are pilots out there, you know that that price can be 60, well, and Santa Monica can go up to $90 an hour, but mostly it's somewhere between $60 and $70. So keep in mind that the first 100 people that do sign up, you guys will be able to sit down with either myself or another instructor. We do the ground lessons one-on-one, typically through Zoom, unless you're in the Camarillo or California area and want to come down to our offices. You can bank it, you can save it for your check ride, which is most people do, getting ready for the oral, or if you're stuck on something, you can always do it that way as well. So we're going to extend that to the first 100 people, and that basically is a free 1 hour one-on-one. So it's basically less than the cost of a single flight lesson. Okay, so that's it for my public service announcement. Like I said, I'm trying to keep these short because we have so much that we need to cover. All right, so so far, I want to know if you have any questions, if there's anything that we weren't able to answer for you. I think we've covered recordings, chat, how to access the website, how to get your endorsement, FAA wings credits. I think we've covered pretty much everything A to Z in terms of the nuts and bolts admin side of how the course actually works. Okay, we try to make it as accessible and easy to get to as possible, depending on however you want to watch the course. But once again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat, depending on what platform you're currently on. Okay. All right, everybody's ready to go. Awesome. Thanks, Lifetime Joe. We'll see you. All right, so moving on, before we take a break, we're going to talk a little bit about the instrument rating, go over what are kind of the nuts and bolts and why should you even get an instrument rating, okay? Most of us just want an instrument rating because it's going to provide us more tools in our toolbox at the end of the day, right? Or maybe you've been one of these poor pilots. I always hear them on the radio, unfortunately, in California, where they're talking with ATC and they're flying above the overcast layer, and they are just pleading for ATC, hey, I'm trying to find the hole. They want to go back. It's a high overcast layer, and magically they're just stuck above it. Okay. Or maybe it's just, it's one more thing that you're adding on your list, so that way you can have a professional career in flying as well. So there's a lot of different reasons why. Number one, actually the top two are obviously going to be the increased skill and safety. So this is actually a logical extension of visual flying. You will actually learn how to use the instruments and navigation equipment in a more precise way. And then we're also going to teach you to kind of disregard your sensory, perceptions and things that your body is kind of lying to you about. It will also increase your safety. So it will make you more knowledgeable. We're going to go over the same things we did in private pilot, but with more emphasis in some areas. So we're going to talk about things like your flight instruments and what happens if your flight instruments fail and those types of things. So the other thing is that we're also going to expect you to maintain higher standards, right? As you kind of go up through the food chain and you even get to commercial, the standards start to shrink. The tolerances become a bit tighter. And that will inevitably lead to a safer flight, and primarily through, risk mitigation. The more that we can mitigate risk or reduce risk overall, the safer that the flight will be. For those of you that own an aircraft or maybe have the renter's insurance, it will also help lower your insurance premiums. They do typically provide discounts to pilots with either greater proficiency. This does include an instrument rating or additional hours, which is always a positive effect as well. It is going to be a challenge. This is one of the more challenging ratings to get. Actually, it's one of the more challenging when we compare it against the ratings in a license. The first one that you guys experienced was your private pilot license. And everything that we were throwing at you was new, right? You guys had to learn about engines and maps and regulations and things you've never heard about. It's very hard to relate that to the real world when you're seeing it for the first time. The instrument rating, unfortunately, is going to be a lot of new stuff. About 80% of it will be new as well. You will learn about charts and different approach procedures. You're going to learn, you're going to have to learn about and get comfortable talking with air traffic control. And you're going to have to basically walk, talk, chew bubble gum, and fly the airplane without being able to look outside. So it is going to be a challenge. Everybody kind of hits a plateau at some point, but then we get over it and we continue. But at the end of the day, it will also build confidence. So, it will increase your piloting capabilities. And the one thing I can tell you is just because you get your instrument rating does not mean that you're going to be going and taking off at minimums or landing in minimums. I would never encourage that. Even after I got my instrument rating, I would always fly with a safety pilot, a buddy of mine. And, we always went to airports that had minimums of, we didn't go to those airports that have minimums, but I had personal minimums of like 1,000 feet at the time. So when we broke out of the clouds, there's always ample opportunity to see the runway prior to actually touching down. And then as we basically progress together, having that safety pilot, someone else to kind of help you rely on, and kind of back up your decisions, we would end up going lower and lower and lower until we could actually build up the confidence and the experience. He actually had his instrument rating after the fact, after that point as well. And you start flying solo and you can actually start flying down to minimums. Okay. So we'll talk about personal minimums as well towards the end of the course and making sure that we're safe in the process of doing so. All right. So what we're going to do is we are pretty much at the top of the hour. I'm going to go a few minutes early here. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the instrument rating. I'm going to learn a little bit about you guys and gals out there. Kind of want to know, who I'm talking to. We'll talk about the requirements. We'll talk about, your privileges and limitations. And then we'll also talk about currency. And then we're going to move on to the basic attitude flying and also the National Airspace System. Okay. So with that, stretch your legs, as someone in our last class said, rebourbonate if that's your drink of choice, or recaffeinate for the rest of us. And we'll see everybody back in 10. All right, everybody, welcome back from the first break. Hopefully you had a chance to stretch your legs, grab something to eat, re-beerinate. I saw Marisol drinking some beer out there. Whatever your preferred drink of choice is, okay? So with that, like I said, if you have any questions thus far, we've kind of gone through the mechanics of how to operate the course in the event you may have missed something or you're just joining us right now. Feel free, once we're done with the live stream, you can always go back and basically, rewatch the first part, and it will basically takes you through it step by step of everything that you need to know about how to operate on our website and basically get the job done to get your endorsement. In addition to that, a couple of questions with the lifetime access. Yes, the first 100 people will get the 1 hour one-on-one. Yes, and I saw a couple of people saying it's, most people paid $300 per class. We try to make it as affordable as possible, at least, and that's the whole idea. Is it, aviation is already expensive enough for all of us that know. So whatever we can do to get as many people into the aviation industry, it's always the few who pay for the many, and it actually helps us continue doing free courses in the future. Just like we were able to add another free class for the private pilot students at the very end of this month. So for those that are questioning or maybe just kind of on the fence and thinking, well, the instrument might be too much. If you're just starting out, I would recommend you start with the private pilot ground school. That will, the live class will start at the end of the month. I believe it's June 30th, and the link is in the chat there. If you buy the lifetime access, you'll basically can start it and get a jump on it as well. Okay. All right, so now that you guys know a little bit about me and what our purpose here is, I want to kind of flip the tables a little bit and ask a little bit about you guys, okay? So I was just looking, and we've got about 300 plus people online in various segments, depending on where you're listening to this broadcast. Probably about 90% of you are from the US, all across the US is what I see. We have some folks, whoever's in Cancun, Dominican Republic, someone in the UK out there, pretty late for you guys. But what I want to know is, and you could throw this in the chat, is kind of why aviation? Is this a continuation? Where are you guys located as well? Always fun to see that. What are your goals? Is this just kind of an add-on so you can basically break away from the clouds, put more, more tools in your toolkit as we discussed before? And then have you started flight training, right? So where are you in the process? Are you in the tail end? I know someone I saw at the beginning said their check ride's coming up here pretty soon. So, this would be a good refresher for that. Some people, they're rusty pilots and their currency is lapsed for IFR. So they basically are using this as a component for an IPC. And then some people are doing it for those insurance premiums, and others are, wanted to become CFIs and also basically fly for the airlines. So this is a big prerequisite for that. So you guys can throw that in the chat wherever you guys are located. What I'm going to do while we're basically reviewing that and while we're kind of figuring out why you guys fly is I'm going to share a video with you. It's a 5-minute video from Swain Martin. He has graciously allowed us to share it in all of our classes. So I always give a huge shout out to him. If anybody here is interested in going to the airlines or kind of knowing, if you wanted to know what zero to hero looks like over a long span of time, he basically documented it from his very first solo flight in his mid-teens all the way to, through his education at University of North Dakota, to his first airline gig out in Hawaii. And now he's with Envoy Airlines. He does a lot of YouTube videos out there. You've probably seen him. But if you want to know about the airline life and, the pros and cons and kind of get a sneak peek behind the scenes of what actually goes on, I would highly recommend you subscribe to his channel. But this is something that he made, I would say, about 4 or 5 years ago. And, his quality has just gotten better and better over time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and play the video and go ahead and put your answers in the chat. And we'll come back in a few minutes. We'll continue chatting about the instrument rating and also the requirements for it.
heading runway 27 right, clear for takeoff.
Runway heading clear for takeoff, 27 right, 015.
Everybody, well, thank you for adding in your comments. It's great to kind of see where everybody is from. We have everybody from all across the country, as you guys can tell, in different stages. Some people started this and stopped it. We've got people that are interested in teaching kids and educators for future summer camps. I saw a former mechanic on here, so we're going to rely on your knowledge on certain aspects. We have someone from the FAA FSS, basically your briefers, so we can always rely on that knowledge as well. And everybody in between, some people that are brand new and some people that have started this journey and were never quite able to finish it, airplane owners, renters alike. So welcome everybody in the process. All right, so let's look at some of the requirements in order to become an instrument rated pilot and kind of what are the expectations that the FAA wants you to, or what they are expecting out of you, basically by the time you are ready for your check ride. So as you guys can see, you do need to have your private pilot certificate or higher at this case. The English requirement remains the same, read, write, and understand English. You need to at least obtain a third-class medical. We'll talk about that here in a second, including basic med. You will need to pass the knowledge test with a 70% or better, or higher in this case, and that's the official knowledge test for the FAA. Obviously, the higher that you get, that is going to be more preferential as you move into your check ride. And then your flight time requirements, you're going to need a total of 50 hours PIC cross-country flight time. 10 of those hours must be in an airplane, so if anybody here is flying a different category, 10 of those have to be in the airplane. 40 hours of simulated or actual instrument time. So simulated would obviously be hood time with a safety pilot or potentially your instructor. Actual, you guys cannot do actual instrument time by yourself because you don't get, it's not like a student pilot license where you get certain privileges temporarily, and then, before you actually officially become a pilot. You can get actual flight time if you are flying with your instructor in actual conditions, meaning in IMC conditions. Or maybe if you've got a buddy willing, safety pilot willing, you could, well, it's kind of stretching it, but you're basically on someone else's license at any time you're in IMC conditions or less than basic VFR. You will need 15 hours of instrument flight instruction by an authorized flight instructor. Majority of folks go closer to the 25 to 30 hour mark. So I haven't had too many students do 15 hours. And in the event you go above 15 hours and you're going to seek your commercial license, you can actually use 10 of those hours above the 15 towards your commercial, as long as they're basically signed off appropriately. And then finally, you need to do your 250 nautical mile cross-country flight with your instructor. It does have to be 3 approaches. Each approach has to be a separate type of approach, and that's usually towards the end of your training. You'll obviously need to receive and log the ground instruction, and then finally it is the check ride again. So that's going to be your oral and then also your practical ride with the DPE or the FAA safety examiner. All right, so pretty much the same requirements. The flight time that you guys do, if you guys fly, you can try to double up on some of these hours. So if you've got a safety pilot that we'll talk about here in a little bit, you could have a safety pilot with you and you could be flying your cross-country portion and also logging the simulated flight time at the same time. So it's, you don't necessarily need to fly 90 hours there. A lot of these can be doubled. All right, with your medical requirements, nothing has really changed. You do need to have a third-class medical or higher. Your third-class medical remains the same. So obviously for those over 40 years of age, it's valid for 24 calendar months. If you're under 40, then it's valid for 60 calendar months. If you've held a FAA medical within the last, I believe it's 5 years now, you can qualify for basic med. That started in 2017. Just keep in mind with basic med, you would basically have to take an online course, fill out some documentation, take it to your primary care physician or whoever your doctor is. They'll fill it out, send it to the FAA, and then that's basically your medical. So the basic med is a little bit easier than the third class if you do have any issues, but you do have to at least have had some type of third, second, or first class medical prior to getting basic med. And then also remember with basic med, there are some limitations as well. So you can't carry any more than 6 people in the cockpit. The gross takeoff weight has to be less than 6,000 pounds. You're going to be using your driver's license instead of your FAA medical to fly. Can't carry more than 5 passengers. Got to keep it below 18,000 feet and also under 250 knots indicated. Not a problem for most of us. Can't operate for compensation or higher. The only thing that doesn't apply to is if anybody here wants to become a flight instructor, it is one of the exclusions. So you can actually be a flight instructor on basic med. And then, like it says at the bottom, you had to have held some type of FAA medical cert that was valid after July 14th of 2006 at that point. Okay. All right, so now that we know kind of what the requirements are, everybody always wants to know what are the course materials and everything else that you may or may not need for this course. So the way that I designed this course is there's a lot of textbooks out there. The one that I kind of always go back to is the Rod Machado book. He's been around for 30 plus years. And if you wanted a book to basically supplement what you're learning in this class, this is the one that I would recommend, but once again, it's not required. Most of you out there, you're kind of either midstream or kind of already started the instrument rating process. Some of you are using this as basically a supplemental class to reinforce knowledge. If you have a different textbook like Jepson, ASA, Sporties, Kings, Gleim, any of those will work. Just keep in mind that you're going to have to cross-reference whatever the upcoming chapters are because they'll be slightly different than the chapters that I provide to you. I did provide you, besides Rod's chapters, the Jepson ones, just because that's the most common alternate to Rod's book. But the reason why I like Rod's book is he breaks down complex things and kind of makes them very simplified. For those that know Rod Machado or have read some of his material, he is a comedian. So some of the paragraphs you can kind of skip because there are a lot of jokes in there. But he does take like I said, he takes very complicated things and breaks it down to kind of a very easy, digestible manner. At the end of the day, it does not matter which textbook you have. Just like this course, right? If you take this course or a Sporties course or any other course out there, we all teach to the same level. We're all teaching the same information that the FAA, we need to, there's a certain guideline of what we need to teach, right? It's just the way we teach it, the way we get our points across, the delivery method and the way that we basically use it. Okay. So that's the reason why I recommend it. I would recommend having some type of text to back up this course just because, we can cover about 90% of everything, but there's still little gaps here and there. There is, we do only have a certain amount of time. So I would recommend having some type of textbook. You can find a link to this textbook. We put it in our store as well. We're not selling it. It goes directly to the author's website. So if you go to our store and want to follow it directly to the source, you can do so. You can also pick it up on used bookstores and Amazon. Currently, it's in the 2nd edition printing. If you want it right away, I know on the author's website, he has it available in the digital format as well. And I think he includes 2 years of updates in the process. Okay. If you don't want to go the textbook route, and I would encourage you guys to get something to kind of back up this course, there is the FAA text. They are a lot better than they used to be. And obviously we got the blue book on the left and the yellow book on the right. For the purpose of this course, you'd actually want to reference the book on the left. It's called the Instrument Procedures Handbook, and this is providing the real-world guidance on how instrument-rated pilots can best use the system they've been trained for. And this will take you through the course as we progress, basically in the same order I'm going to teach it. So we're going to talk about, after this week, we're actually going to take you through basically a flight, right? So we're going to spend a day on IFR departures. We'll spend a day on the en route structure and also the maps that and all the symbology that we're going to see on the maps. And then we'll go through the different arrivals. And then finally, we'll spend a day on precision approaches and a day on non-precision approaches. And that's basically the same format of how the Instrument Procedures Handbook works. It's not as comprehensive as I like. There's still stuff that's lacking and you kind of have to kind of go through multiple books to kind of find all of the information. The book on the right is the Instrument Flying Handbook. Just like the Airplane Flying Handbook, this is obviously for flying in instrument conditions or IMC conditions, using some type of methodology that they're going to teach you to fly different components. Like if you're trying to fly straight and level or turns, it will also go through the basic attitude flying that we're going to cover here in about 30 or 40 minutes. And it will go through some of those, theories as you kind of dive into it. Now, the other things that you will need, and the ones that I can recommend to you, is you will need some type of low en route chart. It does not have to be the physical chart. I'm going to be teaching out of I think it's the L4, L3 chart, which is the Los Angeles one. If you want to follow along online, you'll have the ability to do so through all the free websites. If you have an electronic flight bag like ForeFlight, you can use that, or Garmin Pilot or FlyQ. Those will all work as well. Even if you want to grab an IFR en route low chart, it does not have to be current, just as long as you can physically have one. Sometimes that's better because you can basically open it up and spread it out and kind of try to identify things. We will start talking about the basic en route low charts and what you're going to be able to find and how to read those starting, I believe it's next Monday. But we will go through a flight plan Let's see, last day of class is the 25th, so 24th, 23rd of June. That's our second to last class. We're going to actually do flight planning on the IFR side. So we'll go through everything that we would want to consider, from pulling weather to actually flying from point A to point B, and how do we, do the calculations, and what are we looking at, and what type of approaches are we looking for? How are we getting out of a certain airport? So we'll do all of that on the second to last class. Most of you have probably an E6B, an electronic version or something similar, and then also some type of fixed or movable plotter will also be applicable. Once again, if you guys want to follow along in ForeFlight or some type of EFB, I would encourage that as well. For most DPEs out there, I can't think of any in the LA area that has you manually compute a flight plan for your IFR training. It is something they usually do for private pilot, and then once they see that you can do it as a private pilot, they kind of graduate you, and you can just provide digital flight plans for the purpose of your instrument. Beyond these materials, there are a couple other things that I forgot to throw in there. So obviously you can grab a chart. I would recommend, like I said, the chart just because it gives you the legend. And sometimes it's easier to kind of work with these things rather than having the electronic version. We will also be referencing two other documents. So you're obviously familiar with the chart supplement, formerly known as the Airport Facility Directory, or Green Book. There is a bunch of stuff in here like preferred IFR routes, VOR, test facilities, and also basically a couple other things that we need to know as well, like tech routes. So we'll be looking at that. And then we will also be using the TPP, which looks something like this. This is the one that has the little holes across the top. Some of them are bound. This is for, I guess, Northern California. And this is where all of our approach plates live and all of our procedures for, depending on whatever phase of flight we're basically going through. So all of these things like the TPPs and also your green books, your chart supplements, you can, you don't need to have the physical copy. We will provide any plates that we go over in class. I will give you PDF copies so you can look at them in real time and zoom in as we're basically going through them. And also you can find all these things for free on the FAA website and also SkyVector and then the other numerous sites out there as resources as well. Okay. But if you do have like an electronic flight bag, so if you have ForeFlight on an iPad or Garmin Pilot, that can also be very helpful as we kind of go through this course and we look at all of these different plates moving forward. Okay. All right. Continuing on. So we talked a little bit about ForeFlight. If you're not an electronic flight bag user, I would highly encourage you to adopt it or start learning some of the technology. ForeFlight is my preferred method. That's kind of what I grew up on, but I've used both Garmin Pilot and I've also had students who use FlyQ. But this is going to simplify your life. Instead of buying charts every couple months and then getting all this stuff and carrying it in your flight bag, this is basically taking all of this material and getting it into an electronic format and putting thousands and thousands of pages into a single resource that you can use in flight. So we can use it for our plates as long as we have a backup resource. So as long as you got your phone with another copy of ForeFlight on it, that does count as your backup. But even today, even if you're using an electronic flight bag, I still carry a chart and I still carry some approach plates for a local airport in my back pocket of my flight bag. And the reason why is on my check ride, when I was doing my instrument, I was using ForeFlight a little bit too much. I was staring at it a bit too much, and the examiner reached over and in the middle of my final approach to the airport, and of course this was the approach where it was partial panel, so I think the attitude indicator and something else was broken or he covered it up, and now I lost ForeFlight. And the only way I made it through the check ride after he turned off my screen was I did that approach probably 30 or 40 times. So I memorized all of the step downs. That's the only way I passed that check ride. And now to this day, I will always, always, always carry plates with me. Even if they're expired, I'd rather have something than nothing should my electronics completely fail. Okay. Beyond, your EFB, these all have the ability to obviously file your flight plans, provide weather information, including METARs and forecast. It also does a lot of your aircraft performance calculations. It has a scratch pad on it. You can also upload all your documents on here as well, which is what I do. And it also acts as an electronic logbook if you are so enticed to do it. All right, so beyond ForeFlight, let's take a look here. The last things I am going to mention to you before we actually go through the definitions and some of the other things that we want to cover are, and this is what I tell every class, how can you complete your training efficiently? So I know a lot of people here started and then they stopped, life circumstances, money, all these different things that always, they create roadblocks. And these would be my 4 tips. And these are things that I wish I knew prior to going through it, the second time. So participate in a ground school. That's the reason why you guys are all here. And by participating in this ground school, it's going to help you with your flight training. Okay. Keep in mind that ground school and flight training are completely different, but ground school provides a lot of the foundational material that you need prior to actually getting in the air. If you are trying to figure out how to read an approach plate while trying to fly the approach for the first time, you're going to waste a lot of money. As you guys know, anytime that engine is running or basically that battery master is on, these things go, the clock is ticking. Okay. So if you ask a question to your instructor on the ground and the engine's on, that is a very expensive question that you could have probably found out probably before or after the flight. So by participating in ground schools like this, we're going to cover all the material. You'll get a jump start on everything. You can use this either in conjunction or prior to your flight training. Either way it works. Always work with your flight instructor and try to plan ahead. With all my students, I try to let them know what to expect for the next, time we meet. Usually I'll tell them what to read or what to look over, or maybe there's some approach that we're going to be executing at a different airport that I want them to basically refresh on. Some of my students, they attempt to fly the approaches that we're going to do later in the week on their own home sim to kind of see, what would be the steps and the procedures that they need to worry about. But very much the airplane, as you guys know at this point, should be, it's noted that it is one of the worst classrooms. Every time you guys show up, as soon as you show up to your flight instructor, the bill starts. Okay. So, if you can come in with your questions and everything kind of prepared and you know what to expect for your next lessons, it will save you a bunch of money. Number 3, try to fly at least 2 to 3 times per week. I know this is not always feasible for everybody, but, this is very much a use it or lose it, just like math or anything else. I took calculus in college. I can't honestly tell you how to do it. I can basically use a calculator at this point, okay, because it's been so long. It's very much the same with instrument flying and even just flying in general. So the more that you fly, the easier that we can basically build on the material that you're already learning. If you're someone, and I'm not saying this is the wrong way to do it, but if you're someone who can only fly once or let's say it's once every other week. Well, when you come back for your next flight lesson, typically we're going to spend 20 or 30 minutes trying to build your skills that you lost during the time that your last flight lesson occurred. And, obviously the more that you can do it, the quicker you can build on those skills and the quicker you can get it done with. Number 4, kind of a sticking point, depending on who you are. I would recommend sticking with traditional aircraft, Pipers, Cessnas, those types. When it comes to round dial steam gauges versus G1000, I was having this conversation earlier. I would recommend round dials or steam gauges. They're a little bit more challenging to learn on, but it will make you a safer pilot if you end up transitioning to something like the G1000. I will be honest with you, if you have access to an airplane with a G1000 or an Avidyne system or something similar to that, your check ride will be easier. It is honestly easier to fly in IMC conditions with glass. But the problem is that if you ever end up going backwards and you learned in a G1000 and now you're going to go rent an airplane and fly an IMC for the first time with steam gauges, you're going to be in a world of trouble. It can put you at risk in those circumstances. I would recommend, if you had the opportunity, start with a round, okay, then graduate to the glass. So that way, at least you can experience both. Or you might be able to find kind of a hybrid cockpit that's got a little bit of everything, maybe a G5 and some old round dials and some of the newer stuff in there. The reason why I say the faster and cooler aircraft out there, which are traditionally going to be like Cirruses, Bonanzas, those types of aircraft, they typically take longer to learn. And on top of that, you are moving much, much faster, right? You're usually moving 20 to 30% faster than your peers, which means that, in a Cessna, you've got maybe a couple extra minutes to prepare for approach, brief the approach plate, get everything set up. In a Cirrus, sometimes they vector you so tight and close to the final approach that, you're cooking. And you know what the Cessna guy has 5 minutes to work on, you maybe have 60 seconds. So you have to be on top of your game and make sure everything is done in the correct sequence, and you know, everything is checked off prior to doing that. Even in Cessnas and Pipers, you know, if a student is falling behind, I'll tell them to slow it way back. Like think like, you know, 60 knots slow, because that's going to buy them a couple extra minutes. It's a little bit harder to do in the faster aircraft. That being said, if you own a faster and cooler aircraft, and that is going to be your primary method, and you know that's going to be it, right? Go with it. There's no reason to actually go backwards and start at the beginning and then eventually end up at the G1000. That's the only plane you end up flying. Okay, but those are my 2 cents moving forward. You guys can take it or leave it. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. All right, moving on to definitions. So with the definitions, you guys should be familiar with VFR and IFR. So our visual flight rules is going to be the VFR world that we're hopefully leaving. And at the end of the day, there's only 2 different flight rules that we're going to fly by. We will be flying either VFR, or you're going to be flying under the IFR system. And a lot of times during your flights, you might be combining the 2. You might take off from VFR, you might fly all the way over to wherever your destination is and realize it's socked in. And then you might pick up an IFR clearance and actually end up, flying the rest of the way under IFR. Or it could be vice versa. You needed an IFR clearance to get out of the airport, and then you basically canceled and went VFR. So there's a lot of different possibilities with that. But at the end of the day, you're either VFR or you're IFR, which is just dealing with the type of flight rules. Basically, whatever flight rules are under Part 91, you guys should know the VFR flight rules. We will build off of those VFR flight rules and talk about the IFR flight rules as well, which is going to be primarily dealing with the procedures for conducting instrument flight that are used both by pilots and controllers that basically dictates the type of flight plan. Now, in the event you basically take off IFR, and maybe you're going to do your entire flight IFR. Just because you're IFR does not necessarily mean that you can't see out the window, okay? We have these other 2 conditions, which is VMC, which is visual meteorological conditions, and this is a term that expresses in terms of visibility, distance from clouds, and ceiling equal to or better than specified minimums. So think of you can actually see the horizon, and you can actually fly visually. Or you could be on the flip side of that and look out the window and just see a bunch of white because you're in a cloud. And that would be in IMC conditions, instrument meteorological conditions, which are conditions expressed in terms of visibility, distance from clouds, ceiling less than the minimum specified for, not for visual meteorological conditions. So basically basic VFR versus, if you're anything less than basic VFR, you're basically going to be in IFR rules. So with IFR, you have the ability to fly under instrument flight rules, and it could be clear in a million, or you could be completely socked in and you can barely see the prop in front of your plane. Okay, so just kind of get that in your head that you do have the ability to fly in both, but you're either flying VFR or you're flying IFR at the end of the day. Now, with your privileges and limitations, these are not an extensive list. When we go into the Federal Aviation Regulations at the end of the week, I will give you the full list of everything you can and can't do. It's going to be built upon whatever license you currently have. So if you're a private pilot, your private pilot privileges and limitations will basically be expanded to include some of the instrument stuff. If you're holding a commercial license, then you'll gain some additional privileges as well. So based upon whatever your primary license is, for most of you, it's probably going to be the private pilot license. You will be able to fly in less than VFR or basic VFR conditions. And if we go back to the definition of basic VFR, it's 3 statute miles of visibility and 1,000-foot ceiling. And the ceiling is defined as the lowest or the overcast layer. So that would be basically in IMC conditions like you see on the right. With this, you will be able to fly solely by reference to instruments without any visual references to the ground, horizon, or other landmarks. You'll be able to fly through clouds, rain, fog, anything that's going to restrict your visibility. And then it's going to be, as you guys know, fairly useful in terms of longer distances, or if you live in certain parts of the country, you know that there's certain weather conditions that are fairly predominant in certain areas where it's kind of a regular event. As private pilots, you're not allowed to do special VFR, but once you get your instrument pilot rating, you can actually do it. I don't know anybody in their right mind who would do it at night. Remember, you cannot see a cloud at night until you're basically flying in it. You would be safer to use just file IFR to get in and out of wherever you're going. You will open up a new type of airspace, Class Alpha airspace. Remember, Class Alpha, you need to be instrument rated on an IFR flight plan, so you will have that capability depending on if you have an aircraft that's capable of getting up to 18,000 or above. Now, as I said before, not many people do it, but some people end up going from private to commercial, and then they kind of scooter back and end up getting their instrument rating. So in the event you're a commercial pilot, but you don't have an instrument rating, you do have a specific limitation the FAA wants you to know about, including basically everybody else. So commercial airplane pilots who carry passengers for hire at night or on cross-country flights of more than 50 nautical miles are also required to hold an instrument rating. Okay. In the event you don't have an instrument rating, you will be a bit more limited in terms of the distance you can fly, as you can see in that question. Now, the next thing we're going to do is I am going to give you your very first FAA test question based upon the privileges and limitations that we went over. Keep in mind that this was not an extensive list. We're just kind of going over the overview at this point. And throughout this course, I will tell you probably specifically in the regulations section, we will cover regulations and I will briefly talk about them because they fall under a regulation like loss comms, different types of, approaches and these different types of things. But don't worry, we will go through the mechanics of how each one of these things is going to work. And we're going to go through multiple scenarios, in later classes as we basically expand on some of these topics as well. Okay. So with this, just as a friendly reminder, if you're on our website, please use the poll. The poll is located underneath the chat. There's a button that says vote. For everybody else, do not put the answer in the chat. Do not give away the answer to your fellow students while they work on it. But here's the first one. A certified pilot who carries passengers for hire at night or in excess of 50 nautical miles is required to have at least, is it A, an associated type rating if the airplane is of the multi-engine class, B, a first class certificate, or C, the instrument rating in the same category and class of aircraft? Right, got about half the class in, looking for 100%. This should be an easy one. Trying to give you start off with the right foot here. All right, got about 75% of the class in, just waiting for a few stragglers. Thank you, everybody. It's like the mob has ruled. If you guys are looking for the vote button, it's just beneath the chat on our website. It's a big thing that says in blue letters, I think. Was it blue with white letters? Says vote. Also, just as a friendly reminder, we will come across some test questions today that are cut off, meaning that the full text will be on the slide, but I was unable to copy the entire, word for word answers and potentially the test question into the poll. So just keep that in mind. All right, just waiting for a few extra people. Usually the first time it takes an extra couple minutes. In the future, we'll do these a little bit quicker though. Close. All right, I apologize if I cut off anybody. You guys will have more opportunities as the course goes on. But what we've got right now is we've got a handful of people on A and B. Majority of the class, 93% of the class has the correct answer. So the correct answer in this circumstance is you will need an instrument rating in the same category and class of aircraft. Okay. All right, continuing on. This is always a question that we will get. Can I train in a sim? And the answer is yes, but it's got to be certified, and there's a couple different levels of sims. So you can actually do up to 30 hours, which can be done in a flight simulator or flight training. And then it's broken into basically different components depending on if it's certified within a Part 142 or another way. The main thing I'll kind of draw your attention to is the bottom though. So as an instrument pilot, or basically a student working on your instrument rating, these are going to be your maximum credits. So the 30 hours that I discussed before are going to be kind of for your commercial, which is the total. But if we break that down specifically for your instrument, you can do up to 20 hours total for the purpose of your instrument. And you could do a maximum of 10 hours in what is known as a basic ATD. Or 20 hours in an advanced ATD. Okay, it does not matter how you do it. If you want to do that, you can take up to 20 of those hours and apply it towards this rating. Okay, and that will take off some time. A couple things to know though is it does have to be certified as one of the two, either the basic or the advanced ATD. This does not mean you can use your home Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane. These systems, I think the cheaper ones on the basic side are like $5,000. And then of course the advanced ones like the Redbirds, they can go $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. It does have to be done dual. So all of your flight training, when we're logging it for this purpose, will show as basically some type of flight simulator. Plus you're also going to have your dual instructions. So if you have 1 hour in the sim, you should also have 1 hour of dual side by side for it to count. Does not count if you just hop in there by yourself and fly around. You can log that time, but it's not going to count towards the purpose or for the purpose of your instrument rating. Okay. Some people, they start off in the sim and the reason why is they try to understand the instruments and the instrument scan. It's also a good way to kind of simulate failures. And usually we can simulate failures to a greater extent in the sim than we can in the real plane. But there is, at the end of the day, there still is no substitution for the aircraft. When you're in the sim, we can break a lot of things. The reality is that, you're not being bombarded with air traffic control comms or other pilots. You're not dealing with turbulence and precession and all the other things that kind of go along with flying in the actual airplane. But it is good for some people that need that foundation to kind of build off of. Sometimes people will use this also for holding procedures or basically trying to execute different approaches going into airports that they've never been to before. So all of that is valid, and just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're logging it appropriately and you're using an approved device, whatever that may be. Okay. It's called an advanced training device. So that's what the ATD is. So any questions about that? I'll double check that here. So the AATD is an advanced aviation training device. ATD stands for aviation training device. So you've got a basic ATD and then you've got the advanced version of it. Thank you very much. All right, moving on. So obviously once you get to the airplane and you're outside of this environment, this is kind of like the schoolhouse where we go through most of the theory and how to, read the charts on the ground and everything else. Obviously there's things that we cannot teach you in this class, right? I can't take you into an airplane, especially in a live class, and try to teach you how to fly or anything along those lines. So I want to cut your expectations there. So once you make it to the plane, or if you're doing it concurrently, you're going to first, obviously, just like when you did as a private pilot, we're going to take you up really high and we're going to have you control the airplane. We're going to make sure that while you're under the hood, or whatever conditions it are that we set you in, that you have control of the airplane. You can control your heading, your altitude. If we give you different banks or turns, you can basically do that. And we'll try to make it more complicated as we go along. So this is really, something that will be fine-tuned over time. It's not going to be perfect. And then we try to basically, you may be plus or minus 200 feet to start off with. And we're going to try to tighten that tolerance as you basically progress in your training. You'll obviously be a lot more familiar with weather and weather products, forecast reports, whether you use flight service or any of the other briefing tools out there. You'll be doing the instrument charts and also your radio navigation in real time. Whatever equipment you have on board, I would make sure that you understand and learn. We will go through the mechanics of ADF or basically NDBs. We'll also talk about VORs. We'll also talk about RNAV systems as well. So you may not have all of those systems, or you may have all of them and more. And you're going to be expected to know how to utilize those depending on how your aircraft is equipped. You will be following air traffic control clearances, and we'll talk more about that and what are the different procedures that we need to follow. You're going to be doing different types of things such as holds and approaches. Occasionally you'll do a DME ARC, which is published. And of course you'll do emergency procedures, which is primarily going to be partial panel. So we will start to cover or break things on you, mainly just covering different instruments. This is where if you have a G1000 and we say that your PFD is broken, magically you push the button, the red button, and magically your MFD becomes your PFD. That's the reason why sometimes it's a little bit easier. Okay. All right, continuing on with logging flight time and acting as a safety pilot. So this is, and I know Missy can enlighten us a little bit more if you have more specific questions in terms of how to specifically log it. But pilots are authorized to log both the simulated and the actual instrument time, but only for that period during which the pilot operates the aircraft solely by reference to instruments. Okay, solely by reference to instruments. So even when you're doing it, even when you are, or you get your instrument rating, you might take off from, let's say, I'm going to take off from Camarillo. That's my home airport here. Okay. And I'm flying through a solid overcast layer and I break out at 3,000 feet. Okay. And then I'm going to continue my flight up to San Francisco. Well, I don't get to count my 3.5 hours as actual instrument time. Okay, I can only count the time that I was basically operating that aircraft solely by reference to instruments, which would basically be flying through that solid overcast layer. So I might get 0.3, 0.4 out of it, if anything. And then if it's a bright sunny day above that, I might the rest is basically not going to be logged as actual. If I had the opportunity to go back under the hood and put on my foggles, then I could log the rest as simulated as well. Each of your logbooks needs to include the place and type of each instrument approach. And then for each flight and simulated instrument conditions, you need to put your safety pilot name, or if you're flying with a CFII, which would be your instructor, then you don't actually need that because they're going to sign off anyways. If you want to act as a safety pilot, and this is a good way to time build and basically work on your, split some of the costs and also, work on some of your, just build experience, that is. You can do so. So the safety pilot must be at least a private pilot, and that you do have to have the appropriate category and class and ratings and set. You need to have adequate vision forward and to each side of the aircraft, and the aircraft must have dual controls, no flyover wheels or whatever they call them. Because you're going to be a required flight crew member, if you want to act as a safety pilot, you do need to have a valid medical certificate in addition to that. And an example of this is if you guys are going to work on cross countries, basically you could have a safety pilot, act as a safety pilot with their eyes out, and you could have the other individual underneath the hood. And you could then, both of you are logging time, and you could basically reflect that in your logbooks accordingly, depending on who's doing what. Okay. Now, once you get your instrument rating, you do have an additional currency requirement. So remember that the basic requirement for you just to maintain your license is a flight review, and that's every 24 calendar months. You want to fly with passengers during the day, it's 3 takeoff and landings the preceding 90 days. Same thing at night, okay? There's some other stipulations there as well. Now that you've got an instrument rating, and you're going to need to maintain this currency, and the way that we memorize this is called 6 hits, okay? So it's within 6 calendar months. We've got 6 approaches, holding, intercepting, and tracking navigation courses. Okay, so every 6 months you need to do 6 approaches, holding, intercepting, and tracking navigation courses. That's the reason why we write down the different types of approaches that we execute, depending on where we're actually flying. Now, this is also has to be done for each category and class that we fly. So if you're, if you fly multiple different categories of aircraft or classes of aircraft, then you just need to make sure that you're current on whatever you're currently flying. If 6 months goes by and you don't do 6 approaches, maybe you got 5 approaches, the FAA gives you another 6-month window in which you can complete the 6 hits, but you can't do it by yourself anymore. Okay. So you can do your 6 hits, but it's got to be done with a safety pilot, an instructor, and I don't know who in their right mind would want to do it with an examiner, but you can do it with an examiner as well. Okay. If you get it done in that next 6 months, then you're going to be considered current. If you let 12 months lapse and you haven't done anything and you didn't hit the 6 hits, right? Then what will end up happening is that you're going to do like a little mini check ride. It won't count against you, but we call it an IPC, which stands for an Instrument Proficiency Check. It is done traditionally by a CFII. You can also do it by an examiner. Don't know who it wants to do it that way. And the IPC is very much, pass or fail. Okay, there's nothing that we're going to do if you fail a segment. We don't actually write that in your logbook. It's just additional training. So it is wise to make sure, and most pilots, they'll always get their 6 approaches holding, intercepting, and tracking prior to reaching that 12 months because nobody wants to do the IPC. The IPC is like a mini check ride. You don't have to do it all at once. You could actually break it up into different components or segments, and it's very simple. It's just a precision approach, a non-precision approach, a hold, intercepting and tracking. There's a partial panel. There is some type of either circle to land or something else in there as well, depending on how we want to set it up. And it's very easy for an experienced pilot. If you got your instrument rating, you could probably knock one out in an hour. But if you've been away from the instrument world for a while, sometimes it can take a couple flight lessons to get that squared away and done. So the way that works, if we were to put that for our visual folks out there, this is kind of what it looks like. So the top stuff is all your private pilot, basic pilot stuff. So that's the flight review if you want to fly during the day or night with passengers. And then, like I said, you have 6 months to maintain your currency, which is the 6 hits. So you need 6 approaches, holding, intercepting, and tracking. If you exceed the 6 months, you basically get a 6-month grace period. So between 6 and 12 months, you can do your 6 hits, but it has to be done with a CFII, a DPE, or safety pilot. And then if you exceed 12 months, then your currency is going to lapse and you're going to need to do something called an IPC, which is an Instrument Proficiency Check. Okay. The IPC, IPCs and the 6 hits, they can be done in the sim. If you do it in the sim, there's some extra requirements such as unusual attitudes and stuff that you also have to perform in the sim as well. We'll take a break here in just 1 sec. So here is, wrong direction there. So here is your IPC. We can always find the IPC requirements in the back of the ACS. You can't actually find them in the FARs. It's kind of a trick there. But what will end up happening is that it's just like your check ride. You would look at the area of operation, and then within each area of operation, we can see we've got 1 through VII, okay? And then on the right-hand side, it will tell us what are the tasks within that area of operation that we need to basically go through, okay? So these would be the things that we would cover. We would actually look these up. But like I said, it's a precision, non-precision, a hold, unusual attitudes, circle to land, partial panel. They got rid of DME arcs. So the basic things that we need to cover. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. It just depends on, how long it takes you to kind of get refreshed and back into the saddle. Okay. So with that, now that we're at the top of the hour, let's go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break. When we come back, I've got a couple FAA test questions, and then we're going to move into our last section here. We're going to talk about the National Airspace System, how it is set up with all the different facilities and components and who you're actually going to be talking to. And then we'll wrap up with our basic attitude flying in terms of what are you supposed to look at, and is there any correct way or incorrect way of basically starting a scan. So with that, let's go ahead and take 5, and I'll see everybody back in just a few. All right, everybody, welcome back. And in the final little segment here, should probably take more than 30 minutes or so, maybe 40 minutes. We'll talk about the National Airspace System, the different components that you would expect to be interacting with. You've probably talking with most of these folks at one point or another. And then we'll talk about basic attitude instrument flying as well. All right, so anytime, pretty much pre-pandemic, as we all know, it was obviously a lot busier. We would normally have about 7,000 flights overhead, anywhere pretty much within the continental United States, and they would be servicing primarily a lot of passenger operations. And the way that this thing is designed is assuming we were going from a towered airport to a towered airport. This is very much the way it is at most airlines, specifically when we go from, a major airport to major airport. We're going to start off with a tower, and then from the tower, we'll end up with a TRACON, and we're going to look at each one of these components. And the TRACON is usually going to be known as, if we're leaving an area, we call them departure. If we're arriving or going to an area, we call it basically your approach, okay? And it doesn't really matter if you mess up the terminology. A lot of students, they get flustered in terms of who am I talking to? Is it approach? Is it departure? Is it center? Say whatever you want. They will correct you and you can listen to whatever their response is. They're not going to say, they're not going to tell you to go away. It happens all the time. Sometimes we forget about who we're talking to or who we're supposed to be talking to. But the TRACON is going to be more of a local environment where they're going to get you out of, or basically as efficiently as possible to your en route structure, right? Which is pretty much going to be the center. Centers are going to be the primary person that you're going to be communicating to. And then they're going to pass you back off to the TRACON and then back to the tower. So looking at each one of these components here, the first one, the easiest one, is obviously going to be the tower. And these are, you're going to have different functions within the tower in terms of who you're talking to. But there's 4 major controller classifications at control towers. We're going to talk about 3 of them. So there's something known as an FDC or flight data controller. We're going to skip that one for today. You're going to have your clearance delivery controller. So at the larger or busiest airports, so especially if you go to Charlie's or Bravo's, occasionally some Deltas have a clearance delivery frequency. This is who you're going to be calling up once you file your flight plan, or maybe if you didn't file a flight plan ahead of time and you're on the ground, you're going to talk with clearance and let them know what your intentions are with your IFR flight plan, where you want to fly, all of those fun things. And that's usually where we start. At some airports like Camarillo, we are not busy enough to have a clearance delivery controller. So their job is basically consolidated into ground control. So if you're at an airport that has, just ground and tower, then you can actually make that request, or you can pick up your IFR flight plan with the ground controller. Okay. Now, typically it is requested that you file ahead of time, and you can file through a number of different ways. You have flight service stations. You can file through the briefer. You can file on 1-800-WXBrief.com or any of the other electronic flight bags or other services that are out there. And once you file and you actually call up with your tail number, then they're going to go ahead and pick up whatever you intended on filing. Now, just because you file something does not mean 100% that's the routing that you're going to get. It's going to depend upon if there's any routes that will supersede yours. We'll talk more about those in the future, like a tech route. It will default to certain routing. And it also depends on whatever the flow is and whatever's going on within your local environment. After your ground controller, and they will typically get strips that look something like this printed out in their computer ahead of time once they pull you up. And what will end up happening is at the smaller, smaller airports, they're obviously not going to have this many people. At our airport, for example, we usually have a ground controller, and then we have what is known as the local controller. The local controller is basically controlling your takeoff, landings, approaches, anything within the local environment once you're in the air or if you're being cleared for takeoff. And when you talk with the ground, after they basically either print out the strip of paper, they put it into this little slat-like device. And once they give you taxi instructions to get to the run-up area or wherever you need to go, this, at least at ours, because we're smaller, they just pass that strip of paper over to the local controller who has all of your information, and then they coordinate with basically the approach departure and get you a slot for getting you off the ground. Okay. At some of the busier airports like this, I'm sure a lot of this is electronically done. I know at Santa Barbara, they use the clearance delivery, they enter it in, and then it's basically digitally sent to the ground controller. And then that's basically forwarded to the local controller. So that way it has all of your information, basically your call sign, your altitude, wherever you are starting and ending. So this is San Diego to Minneapolis. And then we have all of the routing from basically point A to point B along the way. Okay. So this is also at some point they're going to read you the clearance, and you're also going to write down whatever clearance they give you and basically have that ready to go before you take off. Now, getting out of the towered environment, you may be speaking with a TRACON. Keep in mind, TRACONs are not located everywhere. They don't cover every point in the United States. Some of the largest TRACONs in the United States, though, are actually here in California. So we actually have the SoCal and the NorCal TRACON. And they cover, for example, Southern California TRACON, which is based out of Miramar. It covers pretty much the California-Mexico border all the way up to the midpoint of Los Angeles. So it is a very, very large sector. We have another TRACON by Camarillo. It's military controlled, called Point Mugu, and they are much, much smaller in terms of their coverage area. But for the most part, it will usually be about 30 nautical miles from whatever the terminal airspace is, and then it will usually extend up to 10,000 feet. There are some, like the NorCal and SoCal TRACONs, that definitely go well above and beyond that and cover a lot of geographic territory and have a lot of different frequencies that they manage. Now, the TRACON is just a name that we use for short that's called a terminal control center. And they basically provide a link between the departure airport and then the en route structure of the national airspace system. So the idea is once you take off, the TRACON is basically trying to get you up to the en route structure as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And where at that point, you're then going to be speaking potentially to a tower. Now, if you do a flight that maybe you're not flying above 10,000 feet, or maybe you're flying within a certain geographic area, you may never talk with a center. A good example of that is some of our shortest flights that we ever did were from LAX to San Diego. I mean, it's like a 23, 24-minute flight in an Embraer. We cruise at 10,000 feet, and we talk to SoCal Approach the entire way down. We never have the opportunity to talk to LA Center. So there are also certain circumstances where if you're out in more remote parts of the country, there may not be a TRACON where you're at. Okay, so you might be in an area where there's just not enough justification to put a TRACON in. There's not enough traffic. So in that case, it will actually default to the center, okay, the ARTCC. So you can find all this information in terms of who to talk to and everything else. You're just going to look in your chart supplement, figure out what airport you're going to be departing from, and you can actually see if there is a TRACON in your area. It will be listed with the hours. Not all TRACONs are open 24/7. SoCal approaches, but they consolidate their frequencies. Other ones like Santa Barbara or Point Mugu, for example, they usually are operating 16 or 17 hours a day, but there's no justification to have someone around the clock. Once you're out of a TRACON, or potentially you take off and you're talking with a center, the next one that we have is an Air Route Traffic Control Center, or ARTCCs, or centers for short. It's a total of 21 centers within the United States. They're always codified with the letter Z, like Zulu. If you ever see a NOTAM and it has a Z in front of it with 2 letters behind it, that'll tell you the center that issued the NOTAM. So here, for example, we've got LA Center, and as you can see, it covers multiple states besides Los Angeles. And just because it's LA does not necessarily mean that's where the controllers sit. For example, Los Angeles Center, I believe, is based out of Palmdale, which is out in the desert area of not even in LA, it's outside of LA. Some of the larger ones like Salt Lake, they cover multiple states. So in the event you end up taking off and either the TRACON is closed, or maybe there is no TRACON in your area, you'll actually default talking with the center to basically either pick up your clearance, or if you're going to be, whatever it is, the center is kind of the default, because centers are open 24/7, while TRACONs are not necessarily open 24/7 as well. Okay. You can find all of the frequencies for centers, by the way, and also the telephone numbers. You can call and find that information in the chart supplement, formerly known as the Airport Facility Directory. And the main purpose of a center at the end of the day is really to provide air traffic service to aircraft operating on IFR flight plans. within controlled airspace, and then principally during the en route phase of flight. Okay, so that's really what they're designed for. On the flip side of that, when you're coming back into land, you will then be talking to another TRACON. Once again, it could be a TRACON or it could be something called Center Approach Departure Control. So there are some airports that do have instrument approaches that do not lie within a TRACON environment, meaning they don't have a terminal radar airspace. And in that case, there are certain stations within the center that are basically going to be designated specifically for approach or departure control. They act kind of like a mini TRACON per se. And these folks are trying to get you from the en route environment, your straight and level flying, down to wherever that instrument approach actually begins or initializes. And then finally, we have our helpful folks in the sky, our flight service stations. I think we had a specialist on, I saw a little bit earlier from the FAA. So these guys and gals are available to us 24/7. Obviously, they are in a much more reduced capacity. Okay, so if you go back 20 years prior to really when the internet was prevalent or when we had dial-up, we relied on them a lot more just because of the fact that we didn't have a lot of information. We didn't have iPads and we didn't have ADS-B and all this great technology. If you had a weather radar, which cost $20,000, $30,000 at the time or more, that would be the best you could get. Back then, you could just dial FlightWatch, which is 122.0. And of course, that was discontinued in 2015. You still can access a briefer 24/7. I know that they are scaling back their capabilities. I don't know to what extent, but you can always call them nationwide on 800 WX brief prior to a flight. Or if you want to utilize their website, they have really good planning tools on 800 WX brief as well. And the main thing that flight service is going to do is they do provide briefings to pilots, also not only by telephone, but by on the radio as well. You can always talk with a briefer also in the air over, using certain frequencies like RCOs, and then also utilizing frequencies that are built off of certain VOR stations. They provide pilot briefings, they process flight plans, they can relay air traffic control clearances in the event that maybe you're outside of radio range. They also provide and originate different NOTAMs, and they also broadcast aviation weather. Now, the aviation weather is also kind of coming to a conclusion as well. So remember that HIWAS, Hazardous In-Flight Weather Advisory, that is also a terminated product as of January of last year as well. So these are the main folks that you're going to be talking to on a day-to-day basis. And I know a lot of people, especially private pilots, when you first get started and you leave the schoolhouse, some people love talking with controllers. And then there's the flip side of that where we have pilots who absolutely dread talking to anybody on the radio. And if they don't have to talk to a soul and fly from point A to point B, they're going to do it. You have to become familiar with the correct phraseology and talking on the radio and getting comfortable talking to these different people. Okay, it's the only thing I can tell you, unfortunately. Because it is heavily reliant upon these folks and their eyeballs. They're your eyes in the sky. Anytime that you're in a cloud or in IMC conditions, they are providing traffic sequencing and separation services. Anytime that you're outside of a cloud and you are in VMC conditions, they are still watching on you, but it then goes back to your responsibility, which is all pilots' responsibility to see and avoid other traffic. Okay. All right, so moving on to our final segment here. And like I said, we should be done in about 20 minutes. If anybody needs to pop out early, you can watch the recording. It'll be up shortly after, about an hour after we're done. And we'll open it up to any questions you may have at the end of class as well. All right, so airplane attitude instrument flying. The reason why we cover this is the FAA wants us to cover it. And I'll tell you, I'll share with you a slide here in a minute about, the reality of trying to learn one method over another. This is an image courtesy of moderator Ryan out there. We were using this in our last class as well. And remember that this is really your only view, right? So this is a traditional 6-pack, your steam gauges. Looks like he's got a 430 in there as well and a Bendix King. But the question is what is this airplane doing? You can throw this in the chat if you can figure it out. Is it level? Are we in a climb? Are we descending? Are we in a right turn, a left turn? Is the speed increasing or decreasing? Is there any way to tell with a still image? Obviously, if this was a movie, we would have a little bit better indication. This makes it a little bit more challenging. But what we're trying to get you guys to do is try to come up with your own type of technique to figure out what is your airplane doing in real time, because you need to learn how to use and trust your instruments and basically disregard the what your body is telling you. Okay? Your body's going to be lying to you. Okay. You might think you're in a left-hand turn, yet the airplane is in a nosedive down to the ground. Okay. So the very last class, on class number 12, we're going to talk about all of the aeromedical factors, and then also different things like graveyard spirals and those types of things, and how your body can trick you, you know, with our different sensory organs in the vestibular system. Okay, so what is this airplane doing? We got climbing, wings level climbing, leaning to the right, slight right bank climb, getting onto a radial, slight climb, slight climb. Of course, keep in mind he is out in higher terrain, you know, different terrain country out there. 100 feet up to the right, slight climb to the right, 30 degrees right. Okay, 30 degrees to the right might be a little excessive. So your primary instrument when we look at this is going to be your attitude indicator. This is home base. This is home plate for you. Okay, this is basically where the buck stops. The attitude indicator, it gives you a pretty good indication in terms of, you know, obviously the Jane in this case, it is slightly nose up. He could be in a turn, he could not be in a turn. But just kind of looking over this image, Ryan, I think left a little bit early here. But the other thing too is, are we in a climb or are we not? And the first thing that I see is that the wings are slightly above the horizon. I can't tell anything with an altimeter based on a static image. I just know that he's, you know, at a given altitude. But one other indication is going to be that we have a VSI that's greater than 0. He's climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Okay. Some of you said that he's in a turn. A little bit hard to see because of the glare here, and also a little bit hard to judge. We can see the right wing slightly or not parallel with the line. I think when he explained this last time, there's a little bit of turbulence when he took the picture. So it's very understandable that the right wing might drop for a second and then kind of go back and stabilize. So I believe he told me this was a straight and level. In terms of the airspeed, are we increasing or are we decreasing? Okay, also hard to tell with a static image, but I can tell you on a Cessna, if we're at about 2,500 RPMs, you're probably pushing almost max power, and you're probably had a decrease in airspeed while you're basically getting to altitude, right? And then at some point it will stabilize depending on his climb rate. His climb rate is very minimal. It's only 100 feet per minute, so I wouldn't expect a lot of loss, but I would expect some type of decrease as you go from straight and level to you know, as you basically point the nose to the sky here. Okay, needs to slightly trim down. Good. So the reason why we're kind of going through this is we're just going to kind of roughly go over the aircraft motion, and then there's going to be 2 different methodologies that the FAA wants us to train you on. You just need to know them for the exam, and I'll tell you the reason why. Going back to basics here, right? We have 3 different axes. We have our longitudinal, lateral, and vertical axis, and each one is controlled by something different. So the longitudinal axis is the long axis. That is basically, if we were to basically draw a line from the spinner to the tail, that is your long or longitudinal axis, and that is controlled by roll, or the motion is roll. It is stabilized by the wings, but we actually control that through the ailerons. On the flip side of that, we have the lateral, and the lateral is just basically drawing a line straight through the cockpit there, and this is going to control our pitch. Now, the pitch is controlled directly through the elevator, and then this is then going to be stabilized through the horizontal stabilizer. And finally, if we were to just basically draw a line straight through the center of gravity there, for our vertical axis, we have yaw, and this is then controlled by our rudder, and that is then stabilized by our vertical stabilizer. So obviously, we have our major flight controls, the aileron, elevator, and rudder, and then we have to figure out what type of combination are we going to basically input to get the airplane to do what we want it to do, okay? And one thing I can tell you with instrument flying is start with a little before you go extreme. Some students get in there and I don't know, you must have watched like a Top Gun movie before you started flying with us. Start with small incremental movements. Honestly, when you guys are learning to fly and you're doing this on a day-to-day basis, we're really not doing anything greater than basically your standard rate turns. Okay, so standard rate is pretty much the norm, unless we need to turn a little bit more, maybe because we're going to blow past a final approach course, but for the most part, standard rate turns will do it. Okay. Also with our climb and descent rates, we're usually somewhere between, at least when we're descending for the airport, somewhere between 500 to 1,000 feet per minute. We should not be going 3,000 feet per minute or something along those lines. The reason why we come up with those numbers, and we're going to talk a lot about stabilized approaches, is that the reaction time of a pilot is pretty much, most pilots can do it, or basically prevent an accident if or up to 1,000 feet per minute on a descent. So if you're coming into the runway at 1,000 feet and you see it all of a sudden, then you'll have enough time to basically react. If you're coming in to land on a runway and you're going at 3,000 feet per minute, you're not going to have enough time to actually react before you get into an accident or an incident. So before I talk about these two methods, I'm going to reference this interesting thing from NASA. And that's what that video is beneath this video. There is an old like 1960s AMIS video, I think is what it's called. It talks about pilot scanning techniques. I just throw that in there if you're interested in learning kind of what is the study about. You're not required to watch it. It is 20 minutes. But the NASA basically conducted this study. And what they did was they took a combination of highly experienced NASA and also Air Force test pilots. And they basically had them fly under, IMC conditions. And they basically studied their scanning behavior over a total of 75-year span. And they were able to basically, have a video camera identify exactly what they were looking at in real time. And the reality was that all of these test pilots did not have a scan or something even similar to one another. Some people looked at some devices more than others. Some looked, in circles. Some looked in squares. Some looked in, inverted V's or T's when they're looking at their six-pack. And I think it's kind of interesting because the FAA wants us to teach you these two specific ways, which I think are good for, starting off to kind of figure out what your own instrument scan is. But don't try to overanalyze the information. At the end of the day, you will come up with your own scan. And this is just kind of a testament to it, where everybody, these pros, the best of the best here, they all have different scans. Nobody had the exact same scan. And that was basically the conclusion after years and years of research. Okay. So I'm going to go through the ones that the FAA wants us to tell you about, and you will need to know them for the exam. But other than that, once you're done with the testing purposes, then, work on whatever is most comfortable for you, as long as you keep your eyes moving. Okay. So the first thing is that attitude instrument flying is defined as the control of an aircraft's spatial position by using instruments rather than outside visual references. The two that we're going to specifically be talking about is known as the control and performance method. And then there's the primary and supporting method. So either one, they're both going to utilize the same instruments, but the main thing is that they're going to differ in the way that we rely upon the attitude indicator and then also the interpretation of other instruments within the six-pack, okay? And it's also instruments outside of the six-pack as well. So keep in mind, we also have engine instruments and then sometimes navigation instruments. So the first one is known as the control and performance method. And with this, it's basically breaking up your instruments into three different areas. We have our control, our performance, and then finally our navigation instruments. So the first set, the control instruments, they're going to provide the information necessary for changing and maintaining the power and altitude appropriate for desired airplane performance. So this is where we use our attitude indicator. It's going to control the pitch and the bank. And then we use our tack or manifold, depending on what your airplane has, to basically control the power, okay? So the second step of this is our performance instruments, which is going to tell us the results from whatever our initial input is, okay? So first thing we do is if we want to climb, in this example, let's assume we just want to climb. Well, I'm basically going to pull the stick back, right? I'm going to watch the attitude indicator, my little airplane go into the blue section. I'm going to basically apply power, okay? Then I'm going to check my performance instruments to make sure that the airplane is actually doing what I want it to do. And the performance instruments are basically all of the others, the altimeter, the airspeed indicator, the VSI, the heading indicator, or DG, and then the turn coordinator. So after you establish an attitude and a power setting using your control instruments, and it's giving you the desired performance, the next step of what you would do is actually trim the airplane. And then the third step is we're going to look at our performance instruments and do something known as a cross-check. And we're basically cross-checking the performance instruments to determine that whatever the initial climb attitude that we wanted and the power setting is actually working for whatever our desired outcome or performance is. Okay. So obviously we'd want to make sure that we're not bleeding off airspeed. We're not getting into a stall. Our altitude or altimeter is increasing. Our VSI should be in the positive. We should also make sure that we're not in a turn right or left unless that was the objective. And we can confirm that using our heading indicator and turn coordinator. And finally, what we would do in this case is if there is any anomaly and the airplane is maybe doing something, maybe we're slowing down too much, right? Our airspeed is bleeding off. Well, this is where we do a final adjustment. We can adjust either the attitude or the power on the control instruments as necessary to kind of make, if we need to continue that climb, we can basically increase power, or maybe if we are losing too much airspeed, we can actually drop the nose a little bit. And then finally, the other and last set of instruments, depending on your aircraft, would be your navigation instruments that you would also take a look at and incorporate. And depending on what you have, VORs, GPS, ADFs, for those that have a LORAN that no longer is in use. So this is the first one that they want you to basically have an understanding of. Let's just say that. The next one is called the primary and supporting, and this is the one that the FAA is actually recommends for students. This one's a lot easier than the control one that we just covered. So this is just another teaching, attitude instrument flying, and it classifies the instruments as they relate to whatever the control function and then also the aircraft performance. Okay, so what we've got is we have our basic pitch, bank, and power instruments, and they're segregated into the following. Okay, the instruments that provide the most pertinent and essential information are going to be referred to as our primary instruments, and then we have our supporting instruments, which are actually going to back up and supplement the information shown on the primary instrument. For every single maneuver that we do, there's always going to be one primary instrument from each of the categories that you see there on the left, and then we might actually be using several supporting instruments from each of the categories as well to support what the actual airplane is doing. And that's the reason why we don't just rely on one instrument. In the event that something failed, right? Let's say our pitot-static system completely clogged up. If you're not careful and you only rely on the pitot-static instruments, how can you make sure it's working or not working, right? In real time. And that's the reason why we're always continuously, looking at all of the different information that's coming in through these different various instruments. Remember that the primary instruments are going to be the one that show the greatest amount of change over time if the maneuver is being improperly controlled. And keep in mind, it's going to be on those axes. So our main instruments that we have for pitch are going to be your attitude indicator. We have an airspeed indicator, altimeter, and VSI. We have our bank instruments, which is once again our attitude indicator, turn coordinator, and then our heading indicator, DG, or whatever you may have in there. And then finally, our power instruments are going to be your airspeed indicator, your manifold, or your TAC, depending on if you have a complex plane or not. So looking at each one of these, if we look at the first slide here, what do you guys think this airplane is doing? You can answer in the chat. Is it climbing? Is it descending? Is it straight and level? Is it speeding up? Is it speeding? Is it decreasing? You can see how the FAA labels each one of these. We have our primary pitch, which is going to be our altimeter, our primary power, which is going to be our airspeed, and then we have our primary bank, which is going to be based off of our turn coordinator. And then we have our supporting information, which supports what's actually happening by those primary. There's always going to be a primary, and there's always going to be a supporting. Straight level, okay, straight level, awesome. Yeah, so if we look at this, right, we can look at our, the nice thing with the FAA text is it will give you an indication if it's increasing or decreasing, by the way. So we have an airspeed, it's pretty much pegged as our primary power. We can confirm with our supporting instruments, we can look at both our manifold pressure, right, which is right about 23 inches. And then we also have our TAC as well, which is right at 23 as well. So it's basically 23 squared on the supporting power. We have our primary pitch, and our primary pitch here is we have a specific altitude of 4,000. We can support that information because the VSI is pegged at 0. And then we can also use this because the attitude indicator is pretty much going to be your supporting pitch and bank for most of these anyways. Okay. This is kind of, like I said, this is the reason why it's pretty much home plate, and we're always going to start and end with this instrument. And then the question is, are we in a turn? So obviously our primary instrument is going to be our DG. It has a heading of west, and then, you know, ball centered, airplane, wings are level. So we're not actually in a turn in this case. Continuing on, what is going on with this airplane? Climbing, straight, level, descending. Straight and level, okay. Okay, a lot of people saying straight and level on this one as well. So if we take a look at it, yeah, tack is a little low. Same slide, different slide, Joe. Losing power, straight and level. Okay, so this is straight and level. It is absolutely straight and level. Okay, we know it's straight and level because we're not. We can see our supporting pitch and bank. We can kind of use that as kind of a guidance, right? It's pretty much in line with the horizon. I'm going to confirm that with our pitch. Our altitude hasn't changed. Our VSI is still pegged at 0. We're not in a turn. We're still on a westerly heading. Ball is centered. Wings are level. The only thing that you'll notice here is there's a little bit of a drop in airspeed. And as people pointed out, you can see there's a drop in manifold and also the tack, right? So someone basically reduced the power, but we're still in straight and level in this circumstance. It's slightly different. That's the reason why you have to get your eyes moving. All right, let's try one more here. Actually, move on to the test question, sorry. So with this, do not answer in the chat on these. Answer in the vote function. If you really want to answer outside of the vote, write it down on a piece of paper, okay? So which instruments, in addition to the attitude indicator, are going to be pitch instruments? Is it the altimeter and airspeed, altimeter and VSI, or altimeter, airspeed indicator, and your VSI? Poll is open. Please answer in the poll. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, please write it down on a piece of paper to not give away the potential answer to your fellow students. And we should be done in 10 minutes or less, everyone. Hang in there. Remember that image I showed you? I think it was like a lemur. I'm sure you guys all look like that at this point. All right, got the first 20% of the class in so far. Oh, you're right. You're right. Hold on. Hold on. That off. Ignore that question, guys. I will give that to you again. My bad. I clicked on the wrong button. It should be this one right here. Sorry about that. Wondering why they were so slow. All right, got about 30% of the class in on this. Finding your watch, Scott, huh? Right, got about 50%. Just waiting for a few stragglers here. All right, I apologize if I cut anybody off, but I'm gonna go ahead and publish the results here. So we've got just a handful of folks on A, 26% on B, and the majority of the class with the correct answer on C. So when we're looking at the instruments, in addition to the attitude indicator for pitch instruments, we have the altimeter, airspeed indicator, and the VSI. So those are all going to be providing the pitch information. Remember that this is just asking which are going to be the pitch instruments. It's not asking which is primary or supporting. So let's look at one other question that will relate to what we just covered here. Test your knowledge. You guys, the right question this time. So for maintaining level flight at constant thrust, which instrument would be the least appropriate for determining the need for a pitch change? Is it the altimeter, the VSI, or the attitude indicator? At about 40% of the class in, you guys are almost in the home stretch for the end of class number 1. So hang in there. Also, a huge shout out to all the moderators that are on this evening. So keep in mind, they do this out of the kindness of their heart. They are volunteers, and we do appreciate it. Can't do it without them. So Missy, Dominic, Ryan, Cody, who else is on tonight? Travis, our IT guy, is here as well. And who else am I missing? I'll catch the rest at the end here, but huge shout out to everyone who is helping out with that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results here. You guys kind of are split class, almost even, about 39% with A. We've got 33% with B and 27% with C. So the question here is determining what is the least appropriate for determining a need for pitch change. So keep in mind, it's going to be the attitude indicator. So the attitude indicator is actually going to be considered the least appropriate instrument for determining the need for a pitch change in level flight at constant thrust. So until level flight, as indicated by the attitude indicator, it's actually identified and established by the reference to the altimeter and the VSI. So there's really no way of knowing if it's truly level flight. So with constant thrust, any change in the altimeter or VSI indications is going to actually show a need for a pitch change. Okay, so the more appropriate would either be the altimeter or the VSI, and the least appropriate in this circumstance is actually our attitude indicator, right? Good job, everybody. For those that missed it, you guys will see it again in the quiz here very shortly. All right, last couple things here is going to be your instrument cross-check. So this is that scan that we're talking about. The easiest way that I can tell you is that your attitude indicator is basically home plate, or what we call your reference instrument. And there's a lot of different variations in terms of how you can do this. But basically what you're going to do is you could do the radial scan, which is basically look at your airspeed, come back, look at your turn coordinator, come back, look at your heading indicator, come back, and basically make a circle like a radial engine. There are some variations where you could basically do a T. There is the inverted V. Okay, so the inverted V would look something along the lines of that. And then there's the traditional rectangular square. Okay, at the end of the day, you always want to keep your eyeballs moving. Okay, and you always bring it back to the attitude indicator. That's probably the first thing that I could probably teach you outside of the airplane. No matter what, the cross-check is just a scan of the logical and systematic observation of instruments for attitude and performance information. And then, like I said, what we're looking for is confirming that the airplane is doing what you are telling it to do, okay? Now, there are some errors with cross-checks. There's actually 3 that we always take a look at. The first one is fixation. So fixation is basically staring at an instrument, okay? And it's basically omitting all or excluding all the other information from other instruments. So an example of that is, let's say, would you guys remember when you did your first lesson as a pilot, right? We told you, I want you to climb at, I want you to do a bank at 30 degrees, okay? if I told a student pilot to make a left-hand turn 30-degree bank, the only thing that they look at is the attitude indicator, because they're staring and making sure the airplane's at 30 degrees. The airplane could be climbing and losing, or losing altitude because they're not getting their eyeballs moving across everything else. So that's one example. So that would be fixation. So another example on fixation, if you have a pilot and you stare at the altimeter reading and you're thinking, why is it 200 feet below what the assigned altitude is? And then you're kind of wondering how the needle actually got there. That can actually lead to, you tensing up the controls and putting the aircraft into a different position. And because you're so focused on why something is incorrect, you're basically emitting all the other information that the aircraft is providing to you, okay? The other one is omission. So omission is excluding one or more pertinent instruments from your scan. This happens for a number of reasons, but the one that we're going to talk about, or an example that I can give you, would be like failure to anticipate a significant instrument indication following, let's say, an attitude change. So if I told you to do a 180-degree steep turn, and the pilot only then uses the attitude indicator, they basically neglect to check the heading indicator or the altimeter, that would be an omission, okay? It's very much the same way if I made you do a 30-degree bank, I'm hoping that you're looking at your attitude, not only your attitude indicator, but also your altimeter to make sure that we're not losing or gaining altitude, or your VSI. And then also I'm hoping that you're going to roll out on a specific heading using your DG or heading indicator. The final error that we have is the emphasis, and this is typically a common one that we see as well. So there's always going to be one instrument that you rely on more than another, or basically have a better understanding of. Most people have a lack of understanding of either the VSI or your turn coordinator. Those are ones that we don't really emphasize very much in primary training. But it can also, rely on, just inadequate information. And then, you don't really use the full combination of instruments that we want you to use. Okay. There are a couple rules of thumb, and then we'll go over unusual attitudes and we'll call it a day. So there are some rules of thumb out there that you want to jot down. There are some test questions, about 3 that will revolve around this slide. So anytime you're climbing or descending, it's actually necessary to begin the level off in enough time to basically avoid overshooting whatever your desired altitude is. And the rule of thumb that we use is you take 10% of your vertical speed. Okay, so if I am climbing to an altitude of 3,000 feet and I want to level off at 3,000 feet and I am climbing at 500 feet per minute, I will take 50 feet prior. I'm going to start my level off. Okay, I'm going to start pulling back the power, leveling off, and basically getting ready. So I'm not going to bust that altitude. Now, there's another test question out there, and I'll highlight this one because we always get a question on it. If you need to level off at a higher airspeed than your descent speed, what you're going to do is you're going to use 25% instead of 10%. So here's the example. To level off at an airspeed higher than the descent speed, the addition of power should be made, assuming a 500 foot per minute rate of descent, and we have approximately 100 to 150 feet above the desired altitude. Okay, so there's 2 numbers there. Okay, if you're going to be leveling off at a higher airspeed than your descent speed, we use 25%. For everything else, it's 10% of your VSI. Then finally, in the event we need to make any pitch attitude corrections, and this is basically using your attitude indicator, and we need to make any corrections to maintain your altitude during straight and level flight, the changes of the attitude should be small and smoothly applied. So you want to use a half bar width correction if you have less than 100 feet. And you have, you're going to use a full bar width correction if you have an error of over 100 feet. Okay. All right. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about today in the last 5 minutes is going to be your unusual attitude recovery. You did these in your private pilot training. The only difference now is that you're going to do it under the hood. Okay, so with this, you'll get basically a nose up and you'll get a nose down, so a VNE, and then pretty much a near stall one. The instructors, DPEs, sometimes we manipulate the controls or play with the trim. The main thing that you need to know is that depending on if it is a nose up or nose down, you can usually tell what the airplane is doing. If you've been flying long enough, then you'll start to hear the airspeed start to decay. You'll hear less air moving along the airframe. And sometimes you can actually hear, you'll know if the engine is not at full power. If you're in the circumstance where you're nose high attitude, there is a specific thing that we're supposed to do with the recovery. In this case, what we're going to do is simultaneously add power and lower the nose at the same time. And then when we lower the nose below the horizon, we start building up the airspeed. We're going to roll the wings level and then recover. Okay. The reason why we're not rolling the wings level prior to that is just like when you went through your stalls, we don't touch the ailerons, right? We don't want to get into a spin. On the flip side of that, when we are basically at max speed or kind of a VNE situation with the nose down, what we want to do is we want to pull the power back. And the reason why we're pulling the power back is we don't want to go faster towards the ground. We want to roll the wings level and then slowly, gently pull up and recover the airplane. We don't want to pull rapidly because that could actually lead to an accelerated stall, which is not going to help the situation. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a 4-minute video of someone actually doing this in flight from our friends at Embry-Riddle. We've got 2 FAA test questions, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and watch, and we'll be right back.
Unusual attitudes occur when the airplane ends up in an attitude that you did not intend. Usually, they happen in instrument conditions, but could also occur in visual conditions when the pilot is distracted. You could also find yourself in an unusual attitude as a result of turbulence, disorientation, or instrument failure. Except in training, entering an unusual attitude is typically not intentional. A pilot will not be ready for the situation and must be trained to react with the proper procedure after the condition is recognized. The technique for recovery must be mastered as to avoid abrupt or incorrect control inputs. When an unusual attitude is recognized, the goal is to return the airplane to straight and level flight. Once that is achieved, you can then determine how to get the airplane back to where it was before. The first step in recovering from an unusual attitude is recognizing that one has occurred. As a general rule, anytime an instrument indicates something other than a normal flight condition, assume that you are in an unusual attitude. Increase the speed of your instrument scan so that you can quickly determine what recovery procedure needs to be used. It is important to understand that unusual attitudes are classified in 2 ways, nose high and nose low. Each one has a very specific set of steps that must be followed to assure a safe recovery, but first, you must be able to identify which one you are in. A nose-high unusual attitude can be recognized by the vertical speed indicator showing an increase, the altimeter showing an increase, the airspeed indicator showing a decrease, and the attitude indicator showing a nose-up pitch. The nose-low unusual attitude is just the opposite. The indications will be decreasing vertical speed, decreasing altitude, increasing airspeed, and a nose-down pitch. Recovery from an unusual attitude can usually be made by using the attitude indicator to set pitch and bank for straight and level flight. When an unusual attitude is recognized, recovery should be started right away and should be completed using the airspeed indicator, altimeter, vertical speed indicator, and the slip skid indicator. To recover from a nose-high unusual attitude, increase the throttle to full, then begin lowering the nose to the level pitch attitude and leveling the wings with the ailerons. Don't forget to use the rudder for coordination. The throttle is increased to full to increase your airspeed, while lowering the nose will help you reduce your angle of attack and prevent a stall. Leveling the wings and maintaining coordinated flight will prevent any further turns while regaining airplane control. These control inputs should be made almost simultaneously, but in the order presented. To recover from a nose-low unusual attitude, first reduce the throttle to idle, then level the wings by using coordinated aileron and rudder. Finally, raise the nose to a level flight attitude. In this recovery, the throttle is reduced to idle to prevent an excessive increase of airspeed and loss of altitude. The wings are level before increasing pitch, as to avoid excessive G-force loading or an accelerated stall in the recovery. Be sure to follow this recovery procedure in the exact order listed, and control input should be made as smoothly as possible to prevent damage to the airframe. After the initial recovery from a nose high or nose low unusual attitude has been made, the airplane can be maneuvered back to the desired altitude and heading to maintain safe flight. If an IMC, you must trust your instruments because you could be suffering from visual or spatial disorientation. The best way to recover from an unusual attitude is to never allow the airplane to enter one. Make sure that you properly trim the airplane so it stays in its original attitude if you get distracted. Prior to departing, prepare and organize your charts, checklists, and navigation logs so you don't become distracted looking for something important during the flight. If you accidentally find yourself in the clouds, trust your instruments and call for help so that you can safely return to VFR conditions. If you do find yourself in an unusual attitude, remain calm and follow the procedures to recover safely. Now that we've covered how to recognize and recover from unusual attitudes, let's take a look at some of the standards for the end-of-course check ride. Perform timely recognition of the nature of the unusual attitude. Recognize unusual attitudes solely by reference to instruments. Recover promptly to a stabilized level flight attitude using a proper instrument crosscheck and interpretation, and apply smooth, coordinated control application in the correct sequence. Perform appropriate trimming to relieve control pressures. When level, maintain altitude plus or minus 200 feet, heading plus or minus 20 degrees, and airspeed plus or minus 10 knots.
All right, everybody. So that is basically the view from the plane. You should remember that from your private pilot training. The only difference is, like I said, you'll be under the hood during this time. All right, 2 final questions before we let you go here. You're going to look at the figure on the right-hand side, figure 145. Keep in mind the test question is cut off from the poll, but the poll is open. You can reference the slide on the screen. What is going to be the correct sequence for recovery from the unusual attitude that's indicated? Okay, remember to answer in the poll, please, and we'll look at one more after this, and then we're done. All right, got the first 20-ish% of the class in. All right, got about 70% in, just waiting for a few more people. Thanks for not answering in the polls. AJ, if you go right beneath where you're chatting or typing the message, you're going to see the button that says vote, VOTE in blue. Click on that and that'll let you in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I apologize if I cut off anyone. So we've got kind of a few people on A and C there, but majority of the class has it. We've got 86% of the class with the correct answer. So number one, first thing is we need to figure out what this airplane's doing, okay? I can tell you just looking at it that if we see an airspeed pretty much going up to the VNE, we know that we're pretty much going to be in a nose down position. In this case, we're in a right-hand turn. Plus, we also have a VSI that's at 1,000 feet per minute. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to do it in the following order: reduce power, level the wings, bring pitch attitude to level flight. And kind of the first two here, we kind of do simultaneously, pulling the power back and leveling the wings. And then we slowly pull back without kind of exceeding any limitations, and then trying not to get into an accelerated stall as well. All right, final one, same type of question, different image. So take a look at the image on the right-hand side. See if you can figure out what the airplane is doing, and then what would be the appropriate recovery techniques in the correct order. You're welcome, AG. Hey, got the first 30% of the class in. All right, looking good, everyone. So let's take a look at this one. Sorry if I cut off anyone. I know you guys are still learning the polls here. So we've got about 10% with A, 75% with B, and the balance of the class with C. Correct answer is going to be B. And if we look at this airplane, it's just the opposite. So obviously, we're having a reduced airspeed here. We are definitely climbing, and we can see the altimeter increasing. We're climbing at 700 feet per minute. We happen to be in a right-hand turn. So in this case, we want to prevent a stall, which could lead to a spin, right? So you definitely want to add more power, lower the nose, level the wings, and then return to the original attitude and heading. Okay, so good job, everyone. All right, so with that, that is everything that I wanted to cover for today. If you have questions, I'm going to stick around, but what we're going to do is on Wednesday at 5 p.m., same time, same place. We're going to continue with the lesson. So we're going to be moving on to lesson number 2. We're going to talk about flight instruments and inoperative equipment. So we're going to go through the basic 6-pack. How do those flight instruments work? How do we actually, how is the pitot-static system designed? What are we going to expect if we see a failure? Talk about some of the known errors like precession. We'll also talk about the magnetic compass and its known errors, the VD-MONA acronym that you may have heard from the past. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the first class. But thanks for sticking around. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, hit the like button if you guys liked it. In addition to that, we will continue having the lifetime sale since people are still asking about it until the end of the week. And the first 100 people will get the 1-hour one-on-one as well that you can use at any point in time. So if you have any questions, I'm here to stick around. Got to give a huge shout out to our moderators. Like I said before, they do this on a volunteer basis. Can't do it without them. So I know we've got Ryan, Missy, Cody. I think who else was on a little bit earlier? We have the few that kind of came in and out, but I will. Alex is also on. Dominic was on as well. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody. Great job. For anybody here that found that that might have been over or on top of or above your head or pay level per se, remember that if you are a brand new pilot and intro, we do have our private pilot ground school. The free one is starting at the end of the month. That is June 30th. It's the same time, same schedule once this class ends. You can always come back in a couple weeks and it'll still be a lot of information, but it'll be a little bit simpler. Okay. Let me see. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic night. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the first one there. You're very welcome, Carlos. Take care on YouTube out there. Adios in Georgia. Jack, have a good one. Brent, take care. Juan, I think. Gene, take care. Good to see you again in class. Let's see what other questions you guys have. No questions today. Dennis, have a great one. Damon, take care. Christopher, Gil, it is recorded, Gil, so don't worry. The recording will be up usually about an hour or two after the end of the live stream, so that way we can process it and get it online. You're going to find the recording in the same location as the live stream, so this will be basically replaced what you're watching right now. Okay. Glad to hear it, Ed. Yeah, it's a process, right? It's a lot of information. Take care out in the DR. Hopefully you guys are enjoying some warm weather out there. AJ, take care, sir. We'll see you later. Yep, Joe, I do remember that you were looking for a video. I wrote it down. We haven't gotten to it yet. But you know, keep in mind, 48 is not like a deal breaker, depending on what you want to do. You know, I've trained pilots in their late 50s, and you know, they wanted to go to the airlines. They knew they were never going to fly a 747 or anything like that, but they still have the opportunity to go to a regional, and they enjoy it. They enjoy it very much. So it's not, 48 is still young. You can still make it pretty far in the industry at that point. Robert, good to see you in round 2, sir. Good to have you in class. Christopher, take care. Anthony, have a good one out there. Yep, Patrick, you can review it to your heart's content. It will be up a little bit later. And then also, it's also posted on YouTube and Facebook as well. So whatever your preferred platform is, we try to make it as transparent and as easy to get to as possible. Let's see. Denny, yeah, if you haven't done the private pilot yet, you know, I would hop in. Congrats on signing up for the Memorial Day. So that way you can get a jump start on it. And hopefully you can join us on our live class in a couple weeks as well, Denny. All right, Patrick is asking the question, what is the standard for the VSI? There is no standard on your VSI. If it indicates a negative 200 feet per minute, that is your new benchmark. That becomes your 0 point, okay? So for the purpose of instrument, whatever your VSI is on the ground, if it's something other than 0, then you make that your new 0. You mentally take a note, and that's what it becomes. There is nothing written in stone in terms of how much the deviation can be, but you know, be worthwhile getting it fixed eventually if you can. Holly, the unusual attitude video, you can find that on YouTube under Embry-Riddle. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it, or maybe one of the mods can grab it for us. If you just type in unusual attitude, ERAU, you'll be able to find it. If not, I will see what I can do to track one down. So the quiz is available too if you want to basically review the topics that we covered for the purposes of today's class. You can do so at any time. You're not required to take it, although I highly encourage you guys to do so, because it'll help to solidify the knowledge and also kind of see what type of questions the FAA is asking. So Embry-Riddle, what is it? Unusual attitudes. All right. Here is the link for those that want the unusual attitudes. And Tony is asking about Swain Martin's channel. Give me uno momento and I'll get that for you as well. Yeah, and he's not as young. That was an old video. Swain, I think, is like 23 or 24 now. So he's still a first officer at Envoy, but he flies one of the CRJs. So here is Swain's information. If you want to check out his channel, he's got a lot of cool videos. And he takes you through his entire career all the way through, I think his most famous videos or most viewed videos, that is, are going to be most of his airline stuff at Envoy Airlines. Any other questions? Also keep in mind, we have our tech team online. So in the event you are having trouble, you can ping us and we'll stick around for a little bit. Holly is asking if the instrument questions are available on the FAA website. They are not. They stopped publishing all of the questions back in 2001. So in this circumstance, we do the best to kind of fill in the gaps, but most of the time, most people are gonna, find that our questions are gonna align fairly well with what you're gonna see on the actual exam. Lifetime Joe, let me double check for you. If you want to, can you send me a message on the website, please? You know how to do that, or open a help desk ticket with that exact same thing. Problem is the chat's gonna fly away and I'll miss it. Ed, the way that you take the quiz is when you log into the website. I think I just actually deleted that page. So when you log into the website, you're going to go to the very bottom of this video underneath the lesson. So let me go ahead and show you guys real quick for those that need it. Go here. All right, so when you're actually logged in, and let me scoot that over so you guys can see it. We have class number 1, that's the one that we're in. You can click on the little question mark beneath it, or if you're logged into class number 1 like we are right now, if you scroll down to the very, very bottom, Joe, click on this. It says the Flying Attitude Quiz, which is actually the same link as right here. Doesn't matter how you get there. Click on that, and that will actually start the quiz for you automatically. And when you're done, just go ahead and hit the submit button. It won't let you submit until you actually answer all the questions in some fashion or format, okay? When we use the notes, how long do they last? So they last indefinitely. So they're just saved under your account. We don't delete them at any point in time. You can download them at any future point if you want, or do it regularly. It's up to you, but they are saved underneath your profile. So if you want to find the notes for other courses, or if you want to basically figure out all of your courses, you can go to your profile. And if you click on your profile, this is also where you can update your name or photo or whatever else you want to share or don't share. And what you're going to see is over here, I've got a couple extra because I'm an admin, but there is a section in here for your documents, and it's usually right here. And that's where you could actually pull up your class or course notes when you're on that page. AJ is asking, can you take the quiz as many times as you want? You can absolutely take the quiz as many times as you want. So go nuts. Go nuts until you get 100%. Have a great night, Joe. Take care. Oren, take care. Yeah, you're welcome, Holly. If you have any more questions, let us know. But we try to cover the majority. Kind of click around the website. You can go explore and see. There's always more stuff to learn inside the website, and it keeps expanding all the time as well. So thank you, Travis, for that. You're very welcome, Rima. I'm pronouncing that correctly. I butcher names all the time. You'll also realize by the time you're done with me after 4 weeks, I'm a horrible speller, and sometimes I mispronounce words as well. So any other questions? Anybody lost? Anybody deer in headlights? Take care, Juan. Have a great one. Did this meet your expectations? Is this how everybody looks at this point? I figure that's how I look probably after 3 hours of talking. See you in the next class, everybody. All right. If there are no more questions, thank you, Missy. Travis, I took a video of you. You probably look like that at 3 o'clock in the morning. If there are no more questions, remember that we are here for you. Our next class is going to be Wednesday at 5 p.m. That's lesson number 2. This class will be posted in a few hours, so give us some time to transcode it and get it in the system and put it back on the website. Like I said, it's been a pleasure for the first class. We will keep the chat open if you've got any last minute conversations that you need to conclude. If there was something that we weren't able to answer, you can always hit us up on the help desk. You also have, obviously our newsfeed that you can reach out to us on, or also the Facebook group. If it's anything like technically related, billing related, anything like that, fastest way to get our attention is the help desk ticket. And like I said, we do our best to get through those. The first week, it takes us a little longer just because the amount of people sending us messages. But with that, I hope everyone has a fantastic evening. Happy Memorial Day to everyone, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.